Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles. Chapter 4506. Ha ha ha. The Grand Mist Ancestor couldn't help but laugh at the thought of this. Black and white clouds rose around him and wrapped around his body as he charged toward the end of the starlight. However, the black-white cloud merely flew a few zhang away. Swoosh! Another chaos storm came crashing down. The Grand Mist Ancestor was so pleased with himself that a corner of the black-white cloud was swept away by the chaos storm. The black-white cloud was like a bubble in the chaos storm, and it was blown away in an instant. The Grand Mist Ancestor's figure was revealed, but one of his legs was missing. Damn it! The Grand Mist Ancestor hurriedly retreated. His pair of black and white eyes stared ahead as he felt a little vexed. Why do I feel so impatient? It's better to be careful. Xiao Hua is a human Grand Ascension stage cultivator, so there's nothing to fear. However, the Star Moon Lord is a mysterious figure who can't be underestimated. Moreover, who is that cultivator beside the Star Moon Lord? It seems that even Xiao Hua has to treat him with respect. Could he be a Grand Ascension stage cultivator as well? That's impossible. How could there be so many Grand Ascension stage cultivators in my absence? Could it be him? Thinking of this, the Grand Mist Ancestor hurriedly withdrew the black and white fog, revealing his body. His previous arrogance disappeared without a trace, and his black and white eyes revealed a strange expression as he stared at the distant starlight. He pondered, how could I forget about him? However, with his lifespan and strength, it's impossible for him to undergo tribulation. He should have died tens of thousands of years ago. Of course, I can't rule out the possibility that he had some fortuitous encounter that allowed him to preserve his primordial spirit and become undying like me. If it's him, I have to be careful. His abilities are strange and he has countless tricks up his sleeves. I owe him a debt of gratitude for his guidance. Perhaps I should treat him with respect. Humph. What respect? If it's really him, then this old man should ask him why he didn't save this old man when he was clearly alive and saw this old man being suppressed in the eye of the West Sea. Why didn't he save me when he knew that I was being suppressed by the combined forces of the immortals, Buddhas, and demons? As a senior of the Tao Gate, he doesn't have the slightest awareness of a senior. He doesn't even care about the Tao Gate's disciples. What right does he have to be a senior of the Tao Gate? If this old man sees him, I'm going to question him in person. The more the Grand Mist Ancestor thought about it, the angrier he got. He had long forgotten about the him who had taught him, and the righteousness of reviving Taoism was on his lips. However, even if that was what the Grand Mist Ancestor thought, he didn't dare to question Su Ji. If Su Ji was really him, the Grand Mist Ancestor understood that Su Ji's divine ability could be withstood by those around him. The Grand Mist Ancestor wouldn't dare to appear in front of Su Ji. Therefore, even though the Grand Mist Ancestor had sensed the Dongfang family's disciples chasing after him, he did not dare to rush towards the Star Moon Palace. Even Su Ji and the others didn't dare to underestimate the power of the Chaos Storm. Even the Grand Mist Ancestor wasn't spared, not to mention the other cultivators. Most of the disciples of the four great clans who had rushed in first were caught off guard when they saw the chaotic windstorm falling. The lucky ones naturally saw the windstorm brushing past them and broke out in a cold sweat. The unlucky ones could only watch as the windstorm fell. Not to mention their physical bodies being destroyed and their bones turning into powder, even the sub-bodies that had been brewing for a long time were destroyed by the windstorm. They first turned into vital energy, then merged with the chaotic aura and turned into nothingness. Naturally, there were some Confucian cultivators who weren't willing to die. Most of them had imperial weapons in their hands or on them. Their tone wasn't inferior to the Immortal Palace's imperial weapons. However, as the chaos storm brushed past, any imperial weapon lost its luster and any material turned into scrap metal. In the time it took to brew a cup of tea, 20% of the disciples of the four great families had already fallen. Change formation and advance. Dongfang Yushan saw that the situation in the Starlight Passage was more dangerous than he had expected. He didn't dare to delay and hurriedly transmitted his orders. Unfortunately, within the Starlight Passage, his strength of a mere 7th-level origin power martial grandmaster wasn't enough. No one could hear him. Dongfang Yushan had no choice but to shout at the top of his lungs. Fortunately, the Dongfang family's foundation was rare in the hidden immortal continent. The disciples who were selected to enter the Star Moon Palace were mostly elites of the human race. They still had the ability to remain calm in the face of danger. When they heard Dongfang Yushan's orders, they immediately stabilized and hurriedly changed their formation. In a scattered star formation, they advanced inwards. If the Dongfang family could do this, the Shiman family, Nangong family, and Baiming family could do the same. The 4 great families occupied the entire Starlight Passage and rushed towards the Star Moon Palace. Compared to the 4 great families, the Confucian cultivators of the 100 schools of philosophers were slightly inferior. However, the human race was strong in unity and order. Although nearly 30% of the disciples had fallen in the chaos storm, they still stubbornly advanced towards the Star Moon Palace. Compared to the human race, the great demons of the demon race were far inferior. They also had some allies, but not many. When they saw the door of the Star Moon Palace appear and the human race begin to enter in an orderly manner, they became anxious and swarmed towards the door. The more impatient ones had already bypassed the human cultivators and subconsciously flew in among them. The more meticulous ones waited for the human race to finish entering before finding some great demons to enter with them. Of course, this disorder had its advantages and disadvantages. The advantage was that the chaos storm fell. Due to the disorder of the great demons, they were scattered all over the passage and the chances of being hit by the chaos storm were not very high. However, it was also this disorder that slowed down the speed of entering the passage. Not long after, the Star Moon Palace moved again and the chaos storm fell again. There were no surprises at all. Under the aura of chaos, the great demons of the demon race first emitted dazzling starlight and their bodies rapidly expanded. Then, without waiting for their bodies to come into contact with the Starlight Passage, boom! Every bit of flesh and blood in the great demons' bodies exploded. This exploded flesh and blood separated from the starlight and immediately turned into nothingness. Go, go, go! The great demons of the demon race were all terrified. They scrambled to fly towards the Star Moon Palace with all their might. It was inevitable that the passage would be somewhat chaotic. However, it was fortunate that this was not the first time that the Confucian cultivator clans had entered. They were already prepared and gave up part of the space to avoid the great demons. After a full hour, there were no longer any traces of humans or demons on the Crimson Earth River. Although the moon and stars were still bright, and the night wind was blowing, the endless loneliness was still spreading in all directions, even more endlessly than the aura of primordial times. At this moment, the area of 100,000 miles around the Star Moon Palace was filled with endless whirlpools of wind blades. Although the appearance of the Star Moon Palace only triggered the aura of chaos within 1,000 miles, the changes in heaven and earth caused by the Star Moon Palace were not limited to this. Although the wind blades formed small whirlpools, there was a huge whirlpool that surrounded the entire Star Moon Palace. Xiao Hua and the others were inside the whirlpool and could not sense it. However, the demon race inside the whirlpool could sense that even if they released their primordial thoughts could not come within 100,000 miles. Even immortal Emperor Go Chen's supreme heavenly mirror and Mahavairakana revered world's divine ability could not see what was happening within 100,000 miles. Although Xiao Hua did not know that so many things were happening in the passageway behind him, he could guess with his heels. Although he was flying at the front, he had encountered more than a dozen chaotic storms within the Starlight Passage, and had even narrowly crashed into them several times. As such, he was well aware of the tragic fate of the Confucian cultivators behind him. Xiao Hua saw the brilliance of the stars and the moon, which was even larger than a mountain, filling the entire passageway. In the brilliance of the stars and the moon, there was even a protruding light pillar that was about to split the heavens and the earth. Xiao Hua understood that this was most likely the real door to the Star-Moon Palace. Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu had already flown down to the light pillar. Both of them were wearing armor and had solemn expressions. Su Ji urged his body to slowly fly above the light pillar, as if he was checking the situation of the palace door. Fairy Xingyu, on the other hand, had a puzzled look on her face as she watched Xiao Hua fly over. "You actually know the swordsmanship of the Confucian cultivators?" Fairy Xingyu asked directly. "And you've even reached the sword transformation realm?" Xiao Hua said faintly, "Didn't I tell you before? In the Dawn Rain continent, there is a group of sword cultivators who specialize in swordsmanship. I have obtained their secret technique, so I can transform into a sword." "Even if you can transform into a sword?" Fairy Xingyu shook her head again. "The body of the human clan is absolutely no match for magic treasures and armor. I don't understand why you don't wear armor to protect yourself. Don't tell me that you don't have armor in your Qinquan bag." Fairy Xingyu is right. "I really don't have a suitable armor," Xiao Hua said with a smile, as if he had no intention of hiding it. "Humph, you're lying to me. Who would believe you?" Fairy Xingyu could only snort coldly. She was really helpless against Xiao Hua, who was stubborn. Xiao Hua shrugged and smiled bitterly. "I'm right, I don't know whether others believe it or not. Anyway, I don't believe anything you say," Fairy Xingyu said decisively. Xiao Hua did not expect Fairy Xingyu to believe him. He looked at the light pillar and asked, "Why aren't you going in? Are you waiting for an opportunity?" "Yes." Fairy Xingyu nodded. "The Star-Moon Palace is an ancient divine object. With our cultivation, we can't go in easily. We have to wait until the Star-Moon Palace moves, Xingyu." Su Ji's figure suddenly landed and he said anxiously, "The Star-Moon Palace seems to be moving. Let's get out of the way first." "Okay." Fairy Xingyu did not dare to be negligent. She hurriedly followed Su Ji and flashed to the side of the light pillar. Xiao Hua naturally followed behind. As soon as the three of them stood still, the brilliance of the stars and the moon that filled the world began to vibrate slightly. Then, the aura that was as vast as the sea let out a low roar. The protruding light pillar began to flow with mysterious fine lines from top to bottom. The fine lines were extremely strange and exuded an unapproachable majesty. When the fine lines fell to the bottom of the light pillar, the entire light pillar swelled toward the passage like a bubble. Puff! The light pillar turned into an aura and rushed out, revealing a starry sky under the brilliance. Chapter 4507. Let's go. Su Ji shouted, obviously reminding Xiao Hua that Fairy Xingyu's figure had already flashed into the starry sky. Entering the Star-Moon Palace was not too troublesome. Xiao Hua only felt a strong primitive aura coming from all over the starry sky, making his mouth and nose feel very comfortable. Phew! Standing in the starry sky, Su Ji looked at the huge, convex, starry door behind him and the mottled light and shadow outside the starry door. He let out a long sigh and said, "Entering the Star-Moon Palace has never been as difficult as this time." Yes. Fairy Xingyu looked at the void under her feet and the picturesque stars and moons around her and said, "Maybe it was too easy before and we didn't gain anything. Today's difficulty is the only way we can find the real passage." "What was it like before?" Xiao Hua asked tentatively. In fact, Xiao Hua had wanted to ask this question for a long time. However, seeing that Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu were unwilling to say more, Xiao Hua understood that although the two immortals trusted him, they were still somewhat guarded against him. After all, they had been taught a lesson before him. Now, they only knew about the primordial chaos ancestor. Who knew what the primordial chaos ancestor was like before? Therefore, Xiaohua never asked too much about things that they did not want to say because he had a lot of things that he had not told them. It wasn't so complicated in the past. Su Ji replied faintly, before we came in, there were many illusory doors. We only needed to find the right one, activate the spirit shuttle, and let the spirit shuttle find the right passage. At that time, there were sometimes chaotic storms in the Starlight Passage, but not many. We were the first to come in and have encountered them more than 10 times. Based on our previous experience, 3 times is enough. Fairy Xingyu looked at the mottled starry door and gloated. This time, the 4 aristocratic families and the Confucian cultivators are unlucky. I'm afraid they will lose 50% of their disciples. In the past, only 10% of the great demons of the demon clan would die. This time, it will probably reach 30%. Su Ji nodded. After all, the chaotic storms have multiplied several times. Although their demon bodies are strong, under the chaotic aura, their demon bodies are like ants. Primordial chaos seems to be here. Fairy Xingyu thought for a while and finally reminded Su Ji. Su Ji's face sank as he nodded, yes, I've already sensed his aura. Although his strength is not as strong as when he was at his peak, he has already refined the yin-yang illustration mirror and entrusted his primordial spirit to it. His divine powers are even stronger than before. Fairy Xingyu said again. Not bad. Su Ji turned his head to look at the huge star gate and said, after refining the yin-yang illustration book, he has the preliminary ability to reverse yin and yang. Moreover, he also used the power of the yin-yang illustration book to forcibly occupy the body of a Taoist cultivator. If there is no special magic, it is very difficult to recognize him. Unfortunately, a dog can't change its habit of eating shit. Some people would never do something in their lifetime, but some people would do it with a wave of their hand. Some people would rather die than think about something, but some people would take it for granted. Fuck. Fairy Xingyu glared at Su Ji with dissatisfaction and said, aren't you saying that I'm waiting for myself? That's right. Su Ji nodded solemnly. In this aspect, we can't compare to Xiaohua. Xiaohua was extremely embarrassed. He waved his hand and said, Senior, you think too highly of me. In a life and death situation, I will also take over someone else's body. You won't. Su Ji seemed to be more certain than Xiaohua. Xiaohua smiled bitterly and touched his nose. Senior seems to understand me better than I do. Because a cultivator like you is the darling of the heavenly Tao. How could the heavenly Tao bear to test you with such a cruel choice? Su Ji answered calmly, without any hint of jealousy in his voice. Senior, you're flattering me. Xiaohua disagreed. However, when he saw that Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu were not in a hurry to move forward, as if they were waiting for something, he asked again, by the way, why is the Hongmeng ancestor here? Does he also need to come to the Star Moon Palace to comprehend? I don't know either. Su Ji shook his head, Hongmeng is the most scheming. He came to the Star Moon Palace in his early years and disappeared from our sight. However, after he left the Star Moon Palace, he did not mention a word about what he saw in the Star Moon Palace. I have never interrogated him about this. He must have encountered something in the Star Moon Palace last time. This time, he wants to go and take a look. Hee, isn't that just right? Xiaohua chuckled. Let's wait here and stop him first and interrogate him. Moreover, Xiaohua originally wanted to say that he also had a grudge with the Hongmeng ancestor and wanted to ask about it. However, Su Ji shook his head and said, everyone has their own ambitions. Why force him? Moreover, Hongmeng's ambition is too big. He will burn himself sooner or later. Why should we be nosy? Looking at Fairy Xingyue's pursed lips, Xiaohua nodded inwardly. He gave Su Ji a thumbs up in his heart. Only such a magnanimous cultivator was worthy of being an immortal. Only such a broad-minded immortal was worthy of being a law enforcer. Xiaohua admitted that it was difficult for him to pardon someone who had harmed him. Let's go. Su Ji originally wanted to wait a little longer. However, when he heard Xiaohua mention killing the Hongmeng ancestor, he did not want to wait any longer. He called out and rushed into the starry sky. Let's go. Fairy Xingyue was obviously like Xiaohua. She wanted to make a fool out of the Hongmeng ancestor. However, she was helpless now. She shrugged and said, let's go through the meteor belt first. However, speaking of which, isn't it a little early to go through the meteor belt? Su Ji did not answer Fairy Xingyue. Fairy Xingyue chased after him resentfully. Xiaohua also looked thoughtfully at the huge star gate and urged his body to follow the two immortals. The inside of the Star Moon Palace was incomparably huge and there were no restrictions that restricted divine sense. Xiaohua tried to release his divine sense, but he could not reach the end of the Star Moon Palace. Moreover, the space of the Star Moon Palace was very strange. It was different from the three continents, the ruins, and the primitive continent. Xiaohua had already tried, but he could not sense the Shenhua continent. Needless to say, the Kunlun mirror could not be used either. More importantly, Xiaohua vaguely felt that the power of laws that imprisoned him on the three continents had somewhat disappeared. The power of the two immortals flying in front of him had quietly changed. Perhaps they had already broken free from the shackles of the ninth grade essence force. It's worthy of being an ancient divine object. Xiaohua could not help but sigh. The Star Moon Palace seems to have formed a world of its own. Even the laws are different. No wonder the space and the Kunlun mirror cannot be used. Only a divine object like this has a passageway to the immortal world. After Xiaohua and the others left, a stream of light flashed above the star gate. First, a bald head poked in and then looked around. Then, a fat figure squeezed in. This Buddhist sect guardian looked very ordinary, but one of his eyes was black and the other white. The Buddhist sect guardian jumped into the starry sky and his fat body jumped a few times on the spot. He looked around blankly and then muttered to himself, so, the Star Moon Palace is like this. Where's the Star Moon Master who came in earlier? Where are the two Tao sect cultivators? After a while, there was no response from the silent starry sky. Only then did the Buddhist sect guardian smile. Looking at the place where Xiaohua and the others had disappeared, the voice of the primordial chaos ancestor sounded from the guardian's mouth again. Hee, so they left long ago. Looks like that cultivator was not him. Humph, even if it was him, so what? The Yin-Yang Illustrated Handbook reverses Yin and Yang. Without the strength of an immortal, how could he discover the secret of the Yin-Yang Illustrated Handbook? Even if he stood in front of me now, he would not be able to discover my background. Ha ha ha, ha ha ha. With that said, the Grand Mist Ancestor also flew in the direction Su Jifei had gone. However, beneath the Buddhist sect's protector's body, there were still Buddhist clouds beneath his feet. Even though there were faint traces of black and white clouds within the Buddhist clouds, Huang Xiaolong could still see them. One had to admit that the primordial chaos ancestor was a rare prodigy of the Tao. He fought against the immortals, Buddhas, and demons by himself. Of course, he was defeated in the end. However, even the Vairocana revered sovereign, immortal Emperor Go Chen, and the golden-winged Peng couldn't truly destroy him. They could only suppress him in the eye of the Western Sea. Moreover, he even managed to refine the yin-yang diagram that was suppressing him. Although he had just escaped and did not have much magic power, he was like a flood dragon entering the sea. Immortal Emperor Go Chen and the Vairocana revered sage were unable to find him. After the Grand Mist Ancestor left, no other Buddhist sect's enforcers came in. After the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, flashes of starlight flickered, and the four families' disciples rushed into the hall in a fluster. Of course, when everyone landed in the starry sky, they calmed down in a moment. There was no need for anyone to say anything. They stood in the starry sky and waited for the leaders of their respective clans to come in. Dongfang Yushan, Shimen Hengyue, Nangong Pingping, and Baiming Chi Han were the last to come in. They did not look at the surrounding starry sky, but at their respective disciples. Although they had expected it, when they saw the number of people in the group, their faces were still a little pale. Dongfang Yushan looked at Shimen Hengyue and the other two and sighed. Brothers, our task this time is considered a failure. Our Dongfang family has lost almost half of our disciples. I presume that the rest of you are about the same, right? Yes. Nangong Pingping said. I have already heard from my brother's introduction. According to them, entering the Star Moon Palace was not a big deal. Even if our luck was bad, it was impossible to lose 10% of our disciples. Now, it is actually half. I don't know how to explain it when I return to the clan. Shimen Hengyue glanced at Dongfang Yushan and said, Brother Dongfang must have some plans. I won't hide it from you, brothers, I also wanted to come here when I came in. Our 4 great clans have been friends for generations, and we're not the same as the 100 schools of Confucianism. Our clans have always benefited both sides if we cooperate. Today's situation does not allow us to hesitate. I suggest that the disciples of our 4 great clans cooperate and recommend Brother Dongfang to be our leader. What do you think? Chapter 4508. This. Dongfang Yushan frowned slightly and declined, I want the 4 families to merge into one, but it's better for the 4 of us to discuss the decision together. Sigh, Brother Dongfang, why decline? Baiming Chi Han sighed, exploring the Star Moon Palace isn't a particularly important matter, Brother Dongfang doesn't need to take any responsibility. We just need to do our job well and not let the sect punish us. That's good too. Dongfang Yushan nodded and looked around, our 4 families still don't have enough disciples. Why don't we wait for those families that are on good terms with us and enter together? Nangong Pingping and the others looked at each other, then looked at the disciples of their respective families and nodded. Because the opportunities in the Star Moon Palace were different from ordinary opportunities, it didn't care about the number of people. No matter how many people there were, those who had opportunities would naturally be able to comprehend the power of literature and break through the bottleneck to become a literature saint. No matter how few people there were, if they didn't have opportunities, they would gain nothing. Seeing that no one had any objections, Dongfang Yushan discussed with the others in a low voice and quietly allowed the other disciples to enter. During this time, there were more great beasts from the demon race who came in one after another. When these great beasts entered, they were all ecstatic. Then, they looked at the humans who were waiting inexplicably and moved their bodies to different places in the starry sky. Seeing that these great beasts flew in different directions, Dongfang Yushan and the others looked at each other and smiled with disdain. Because, like the Grand Mist Ancestor, they were very clear that there were countless passages from the Star Moon Palace to the depths of the starry sky. However, until now, they only knew that the path to the meteor belt was the safest and had the least number of monsters. After the great beasts, the disciples of various families came in. Seeing the disciples of the 4 families waiting here, how could they not know why? Those who were related to the 4 families naturally came over, and those who weren't were also thinking of ways to get close or began to form an alliance according to the previous plan. Gongshu family, Murong family, Duanmu family, Huangfu family, Confucius family, and other families also began to gather around, ready to go. While the 4 aristocratic families were gathering their forces, Xiaohua had already followed Su Ji and Fairy Xingyue to the so-called meteor belt. According to Xiaohua's thoughts, the so-called meteor belt should be similar to the falling rock formation he had seen before. There would be many meteors shuttling back and forth in this area. If one wanted to pass through, they only needed to avoid the meteors and be careful. However, when he flew through the starry sky and arrived in front of a huge space, he realized that he had been too naive. The Star-Moon Palace was a place that even the two banished immortals feared, so how could it possibly have a simple rockfall matrix? In front of Xiao Hua was an extremely large space. This space was almost boundless and stretched across the starry sky in front of the three of them. There were a lot of spatial fragments in the space, and these fragments were constantly flying around recklessly. Xiao Hua looked at it. These fragments were either in the shape of a long strip, or in the shape of a square, or in the shape of an irregular hexagram. However, when Xiao Hua looked deeper into the space, there were even more fragments that didn't have any fixed shape. One moment, they would condense into a circle, and the next moment, they would condense into a sheet. The strangest thing was that there were lines that didn't have any shape flowing freely in the space. However, no matter the size or shape of the fragments, there was a layer of starlight flickering around these fragments. The starlight blocked Xiao Hua's vision, so he couldn't see what was under the starlight. Xiao Hua released his divine thought naturally, but as soon as his divine thought entered the space, it was immediately torn apart by several unknown forces. It was instantly torn apart, and an indescribable stabbing pain came from his Naiwan palace. The innate divine restriction outside his Naiwan palace actually couldn't stop this space from attacking his divine thought. When they were slightly closer, boom, boom, boom. Layers upon layers of ghostly wails and wolf howls came from the space. This sound of the wind was quite soul-stealing, causing Xiao Hua to feel a chill run down his spine. The strangest thing was that within the space, there was also the aura of a violent wind blowing against his face. Strands of ripples also rushed over along with the aura. Xiao Hua could easily distinguish that a portion of the aura and ripples were similar to the Thousand Demons' sacred realm, while a portion was similar to the ruins and the primeval continent. Of course, there was still a portion that Xiao Hua did not know about. This. Xiao Hua was dumbfounded. He whispered to Fairy Xingyu, "Is this the meteor belt that Senior mentioned?" "Of course." Fairy Xingyu said proudly, "Can't you see that there is starlight on these fragments? Moreover, these fragments are flowing in this space like water. Shouldn't they be called a meteor belt?" "All right." Xiao Hua said helplessly, "I thought the so-called meteor belt was similar to the star array." "What?" Fairy Xingyu said with a smile, "Do you think this name is inappropriate?" "It's not that it's inappropriate." Xiao Hua said with a bitter smile, "I just think, it's a little weird to call it a meteor belt." "Then there's no other way." Fairy Xingyu said with a smile, "I was the one who named the Star-Moon Palace. Now, it's famous in the 3 continents. If you want to change it. I'm afraid it won't be easy." "Senior, is there any danger in this meteor belt?" Xiao Hua ignored Fairy Xingyu's show and looked at Su Ji. Su Ji looked at the chaotic space and pointed at the space fragments with his hand. He said, "These space fragments are different. Some are earth fragments, some are ocean fragments, and some are pure void fragments. If they are void fragments, there will be voids in different realms. After the human clan enters, most of our bodies will be destroyed by the chi of heaven and earth. Even if they are earth fragments, ocean fragments, or mountain fragments, there will be some strange beasts on them. Some of these strange beasts are from the immortal world, some are from the Demon League, and there are many that we don't know. If the human clan cultivators encounter them, they will most likely die." Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and looked at the fragments that had no rules. His heart was pounding. Su Ji then pointed at the space between the fragments and said, "Then there are these spaces. Divine sense can't enter these spaces. Even if our divine sense were to enter, it would be torn apart, let alone your divine sense. The reason why there is such a strange phenomenon is because these space fragments belong to different realms. The auras of different realms collide with each other in the space, forming an extremely strange cutting force. You must have sensed the aura within. Some are similar to the Thousand Demons' sacred realm, some are similar to the immortal realm and the Demon League. Most of them are ancient, desolate auras. Those are the fragments left behind when the Star-Moon Palace was refined in ancient times. There are shattered desolate spaces on them. The chaotic intertwining of the auras of different realms will not only tear apart divine senses and extended thoughts, but also the bodies of the human clan. Therefore, we can't fly through this space for no reason. We can only find a gap in the chaotic aura and land in a safe space fragment. Then, we can cross this meteor belt step by step. Fairy Xingyu said with a smile, of course. What if we are lucky enough to encounter a transmission channel in one of the spaces without having to pass through all the space fragments? I'm not that lucky. Xiaohua immediately said with a bitter face, whenever I have to find a way out, I've always taken the furthest path. It's a thankless task. Hee hee. Fairy Xingyu covered her mouth and giggled. I thought you said you would be the luckiest. Xiaohua shrugged and asked Su Ji in bewilderment, Senior, if I didn't have the Kunlun mirror, would the disciples of the star-picking tower and the cultivators chosen to sense the power of the stars and moon, also have to pass through this meteor belt? Su Ji naturally understood Xiaohua's doubts and explained, when Fairy Xingyu and I first discovered the Star-Moon Palace, we were the ones who entered. In addition to this meteor belt, we also went to many other places. Therefore, we have a good understanding of the Star-Moon Palace and the way to enter it. Therefore, most of the disciples chosen by Fairy Xingyu in the Star-Picking Tower should be able to pass through the previous Starlight Passage smoothly. Entering the Star-Moon Palace is a kind of reward for them. As for what opportunities they will encounter, that is their own business. Therefore, generally speaking, after entering the Star-Moon Palace, Fairy Xingyu will let them go their own way and find their own path. The cultivators chosen to help us search for the power of the stars and moon will naturally have to follow us. When passing through this meteor belt, half of them will have no problem. The other half will not be able to pass through. Fairy Xingyu and I will use our magical powers to bring them over. That's impossible. Xiaohua looked at the space fragments floating in the sky like a mighty river and said in surprise, I don't even dare to say that I have full confidence in passing through this meteor belt. Senior, half of the cultivators you mentioned will be able to pass through. This time, we came at the wrong time. We might have come a little early or a little late. It's different from the previous times. Let's wait a little longer. It won't be long before the space vortex of this meteor belt stops. At that time, we will have a chance to pass through. Su Ji said faintly. He sat cross-legged in front of the starry sky. The lightning mark between his eyebrows flickered and appeared. A very mysterious fluctuation emerged from Su Ji's body and spread toward the vicinity of the meteor belt. When Fairy Xingyu saw this, she frowned and whispered, Su Ji, can your physical body withstand the expansion of thoughts? It doesn't matter. Su Ji said softly, I won't be using this physical body soon. There's no harm in trying. It's better to be careful. Fairy Xingyu said with concern, it's not the final moment yet. If something unexpected happens. Yes, I know. Su Ji nodded. I know what I'm doing. That. Xiaohua thought for a moment and whispered, Senior, if you don't have to worry, leave this task to me. Don't use the methods of the immortal world. Chapter 4509. You. Su Ji was a little skeptical and asked, what other magical powers do you have? This is the Star-Moon Palace. Let me try first. Xiaohua said with a smile. If I can do it, you don't have to waste. Extend thought. The corners of Su Ji's mouth curled into a faint smile as he said in a gratified manner, all right, you can try first. As he spoke, Su Ji withdrew his extend thought and looked at Xiaohua kindly. Even Fairy Xingyu had a grateful smile in her eyes. Xiaohua nodded slightly at the two immortals. He raised his hand and patted his forehead, opening his delusion breaker eye again. Seeing a green shadow flashing between Xiaohua's eyebrows, Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu looked at each other with a strange look in their eyes. Xiaohua opened his eyes, and everything in front of him changed again. What starry sky, what meteor belt, they all disappeared. In front of him was an incomparably huge space, and the space was filled with countless fragments of different splendors. These fragments seemed like dust, and also like crushed stones, floating in the countless fine lines that seemed like flowing water. The fragments were similar to the space fragments that Xiaohua had seen with his naked eye, but they were much smaller. As for whether each fragment was a continent or an ocean, Xiaohua's delusion breaker eye could not tell. As for the fine lines, they flowed at an extremely fast speed and were entangled with each other. Some fine lines even rushed into the fragments and shattered them. Not only were the brilliance of these fine lines different, but their thickness was also different. Some were as thin as hair, and some were as thick as threads. However, hundreds of millions of fine lines enveloped the entire space. In front of Xiaohua's eyes, there was a thin mist-like golden light that protected Xiaohua and the others. There were some strange runes in the golden light. These runes were like fine lines of light, and within the fine lines of light, smaller runes were engraved. This golden light covered the sky and the earth, separating it from the fine lines like flowing water in an orderly manner. Even in the distance of the meteor belt, it looked like the runes were also paved with golden light. Xiaohua looked around. The fine lines of the flowing water seemed to have no source and no end. On his left and right, two dim silvery white human-shaped lights flashed slightly. Xiaohua naturally knew that this silver-white humanoid brilliance was Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu. Therefore, he only glanced at them from the corner of his eye. He did not dare to look at them for too long. Then, he focused his delirium dharma eye on the fine lines of the water flow. After looking at it carefully for a moment, Xiaohua had an idea in his heart. Just as Su Ji said, the fine lines were slowly slowing down. Moreover, the collisions between the different colored fine lines were starting to lessen. Xiaohua could even see a slightly chaotic order in the fine lines before his eyes. Seeing the delusion breaker Dharma eye on Xiaohua's forehead disappear, Su Ji asked with some concern, "How is it? Your divine art didn't suffer any backlash from the meteor belt, right?" Xiaohua's heart warmed slightly. This kind of adventure was a true adventure. There was no need to worry about being tricked by others. If there was some danger, others would even block it for you. Xiaohua smiled and said, "Senior, you should know that this divine ability of mine usually won't backfire." "Well, what did you see?" Unlike Su Ji, Fairy Xingyu urged, "Can you see the passage they flew through?" Xiaohua shook his head and said, "There is no passage in this meteor belt. We can only rush through it slowly like what you said just now." "Oh." Fairy Xingyu responded with some disappointment. "However, I saw that these different auras are slowing down. Moreover, there is a certain order between the auras." Xiaohua said again. A strange look flashed across Su Ji's eyes as he whispered, "Your divine art. Is it the Buddha's heavenly eye?" "Well, it's somewhat similar." Xiaohua didn't hide it and replied, "However, there is also a big difference. My Dharma eye is much more powerful than heavenly eye." "You're just bluffing." Fairy Xingyu didn't believe him. "Also." Xiaohua pointed to the two sides and asked, "Is there no other place that is easy to pass through?" "Actually, there are other pavilions in this meteor belt that we can go to." Su Ji explained, "However, those pavilions require some strange tokens. Fairy Xingyu and I didn't find any, so we can't enter those pavilions. On the other side of this meteor belt, there are some places that don't require tokens. In particular, there is one place, that might be the passage, so we have to go through there. When Su Ji and I first came here, we spent most of our time in this meteor belt, so we know the situation on the other side of this meteor belt the best." Fairy Xingyu added, "This meteor belt is almost endless. Even with our ability, we can't find the end of it. In the nearby hundreds of thousands of miles, only this place has a relatively weak aura. There are also times when it has a lull. The other places are like rivers, and the auras of the various realms are like waves, never calming down. We can't pass through it all. Senior, you must have tried other methods. Xiao Hua probed. Were they all ineffective? Yes. Su Ji nodded. After finding a pavilion with a strong immortal spiritual aura, we were a little impatient when we entered. When we passed through this meteor belt, we tried to use the flowing cloud bridge of the immortal realm. Not only did it not bring us to the other side of the meteor belt, but it also almost destroyed my physical body at that time. Senior, can you protect me? Xiao Hua pondered for a moment and asked. What do you want to do? Su Ji frowned. Since we're here, don't fail at the last step. Why don't you wait for a while? Junior will try. Xiao Hua smiled. If it works, not only will Senior have more confidence, but Junior will also have more means to protect my life in this Star Moon Palace. It's better not to try. Su Ji's concern was like facing his own junior. He said, Fairy Xingyu and I didn't tell you the details of the Star Moon Palace because we were afraid that you would have your own ideas and inevitably use your own methods. You just need to follow behind us and contribute when it's time. Junior will try. Xiao Hua still refused to give up. If there's anything unusual about this meteor belt, Senior only needs to block the backlash of the meteor belt. Presumably, Senior already has some experience, right? Su Ji was a little unhappy. He glanced at Xiao Hua and said, Have you really decided? Yes. Junior wants to try. Xiao Hua nodded affirmatively. Well, you can cast the spell. Su Ji agreed. If there's anything unusual, I'll block the backlash for you. However, the backlash of this meteor belt is very strange. I'm not sure if I can block it. You have to be careful too. Okay. Xiao Hua responded. His eyes narrowed slightly, and the soul silk between his eyebrows rushed out. In an instant, a ghostly chanting sound came from the soul silk. One by one, green seal characters flew out from between his eyebrows and quickly separated and combined in midair. Shaman. Fairy Xingyue opened her mouth, her eyes filled with horror. Su Ji's expression also changed drastically. Before Su Ji could stop Xiao Hua, he saw the green seal text land in the sky of the meteor belt. A tumbling teleportation channel slowly appeared, and within the teleportation channel, the green seal text swarmed towards the opposite side of the meteor belt. However, just as this technique passed through the golden light that Xiao Hua's delusion breaker eye could see, the runes in the golden light immediately transformed into a long spear that was several feet long. It let out a sharp whistle and crazily rushed into the green seal text. Pa! With a loud sound, the green seal text of the word transmit completely collapsed. The transmission channel that had just been formed also collapsed from the inside out. When the transmission channel turned into hundreds of small green seal characters, more golden runes once again turned into thumb-sized spears and pierced into the smaller green seal characters. Pa pa pa. More rumbling sounds were heard until all the green seal characters were destroyed. Not only that, when the green seal characters disappeared, the golden light condensed into a spear several feet long and pierced toward Xiao Hua's eyebrows like lightning and thunder. Get out of the way. Although Su Ji couldn't see the spear condensed from the golden light, he could feel the recoil of the meteor belt. Seeing that the attack was even more powerful than the one he had encountered before, Su Ji shouted loudly, and his figure was about to block in front of Xiao Hua. No need. Xiao Hua felt a strong wind coming from between his eyebrows. Even his delusion breaker eye seemed to be blown apart by this strong wind. Xiao Hua hurriedly shouted, We'll just use the thunder technique to block this attack. As he spoke, lightning surged around Xiao Hua's body. Four-colored lightning shot out from his hand and pounced on the spear-shaped runes. Okay. Su Ji didn't dare to be careless. His hands formed seals, and two water-blue lightning passed through the space and merged with Xiao Hua's four-colored lightning. Bang! With a loud bang, the five-colored lightning was smashed into powder. The spear condensed by the golden runes didn't collapse, but its sharpness was already reduced by 60%. Xiao Hua's figure flashed, and in an instant, the spear didn't even touch his shadow. Bang! Not far behind Xiao Hua, the starry sky was destroyed by the invisible spear, and a huge black hole appeared. A strong suction force came from the black hole, sucking in the nearby fluctuations in aura. Xiao Hua and the others were slightly shocked. They each used their magical powers to teleport away, avoiding the suction force of the black hole. After a few minutes, the black hole slowly disappeared, and Xiao Hua flew back. How was it? Su Ji asked, have you given up? Yes, I know. Xiao Hua nodded. He had really given up. It seemed that the soul cultivation technique, which had always been successful, had lost its former power in the Star Moon Palace built in ancient times. Fairy Xingyu said with a smile, Su Ji, Xiao Hua is doing this out of kindness. He just wants to save us some trouble. He's just trying to be brave and competitive. Xiao Hua smiled faintly and didn't admit it. Su Ji glanced at Xiao Hua with a cold expression. He then looked at Fairy Xingyu and said, I haven't been a judge for many years. I'm no longer as cold-blooded as before. Furthermore, I was once an ordinary mortal. Naturally, I can see these things as well. Chapter 45:10. After that, Su Ji looked at Xiao Hua again and said earnestly, Xiao Hua, have you forgotten? Xingyue and I have already warned you. Some magical powers should not be revealed in front of others. Did you take it as a passing wind? Although we don't understand the magical power you just used, how can we not know what it is? Taboo power is the most taboo power in the immortal world. As long as there is a taboo power, the celestial venerables will hunt it down and eliminate it. I know you trust us, but we don't dare to trust ourselves. Who knows what kind of interrogation we will encounter when we return to the immortal world. Even if it's a soul search, it's normal. We can't guarantee that we won't reveal your secret. If this matter brings disaster to you, then you can only blame yourself. Su Ji's words were very strict, but they were sincere and sincere. Xiao Hua seemed to see another helpless person standing in front of him and berating him. He straightened his face, bowed, and said, Yes, I understand. Thank you for your reminder, Senior. In this world, there is no one you can absolutely trust. The coldness on Su Ji's face lessened slightly, and he said, It's just that the price of betrayal is different. If the price is high enough, some people may even abandon the realm that gave birth to them. Yes, I've learned my lesson. Xiao Hua, of course, knew the care in Su Ji's words. He didn't dare to straighten his back and answered respectfully. It's good that you know. You're just two. Su Ji hesitated and stopped. He looked at the chaotic realm, and the aura gradually calmed down. He said, Forget it, let's not talk about this. The meteor belt seems to have changed. Let's wait a little longer. Okay. Xiao Hua agreed. In fact, he opened his illusion breaker eyes again and carefully observed the meteor belt. Fairy Xingyue watched Su Ji berate Xiao Hua from the side. Her eyes showed a trace of confusion and a trace of complexity. At this time, the Xingyue palace had begun to bustle. Other than the four aristocratic families and some of the Confucian cultivators rushing to the meteor belt, the other Confucian cultivators and great demons of the demon clan also went to other places in the Xingyue palace. There were no traces of people outside the Xingyue palace. When the Xingyue palace moved again, even the starlight passage between the gate and the thousand demons' sacred realm could not hold on. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. The entire starlight passage completely collapsed, and the passage was completely filled with chaotic storms. In just a moment, the starlight disappeared, and a powerful whirlwind in the interspace. The whirlwind blew out of the interlayer, scattering the power of the stars and the moon in the sky. Without the starlight passage, the Xingyue Palace began to move faster. In the time it took to eat a meal, the huge aura within hundreds of thousands of miles was concealed in the void again. Boom! The moment the aura disappeared, the Chitty River, which had been split open by the Xingyue Palace, let out a violent roar, and the river surged again. Furthermore, at the spot where the Xingyue Palace had disappeared, the space within hundreds of thousands of miles seemed to have suddenly become completely empty. Endless qi of heaven and earth and noble qi surged in, forming a rare hurricane. Not only did the hurricane cause the wind and clouds to sway in the sky, but it also caused the Chitty River to surge with red waves. The waves surged violently, and the nearby mountain ranges were blown into flying sand and rolling stones, causing the forest to collapse. The previously bright starry sky was gone, and the hook-like crescent moon was even more desolate. Occasionally, it would appear in the gaps of the dark clouds. The moonlight was also scattered by the strong wind. The Xingyue Palace appeared and disappeared again. It was unknown, where it would appear again, and when it would appear again. Senior. Xiao Hua observed for a moment in front of the meteor belt and whispered, "It's about time. I feel that the aura in this area has begun to calm down. If I'm not wrong, I've found some patterns." Su Ji nodded. "It's similar to my perception, but I'm not sure. Tell me, which spatial fragment should we fly to?" Xiao Hua explained, "Senior, I don't know which spatial fragment to fly to, but I know which spatial fragment has a stable aura." "I understand." Fairy Xingyue nodded. "According to our previous experience, there are currently 6 spatial fragments that we can enter. If there are other disciples, we will split into 6 groups and enter separately. Now that you can determine the stability of the spatial fragments, we don't have to test them one by one." "Which 6 spatial fragments?" Xiao Hua asked hurriedly. Fairy Xingyue raised her hand and pointed. She did not point at the few spatial fragments closest to Xiao Hua and the others. Instead, she pointed at 2 rectangular spatial fragments, 3 rectangular spatial fragments, and 1 6-star spatial fragment that was slightly further away. The 6-star spatial fragment was even further behind a pile of spatial fragments. Xiao Hua was stunned. He looked up at Fairy Xingyue and said, "It seems. Senior, you're not just relying on your experience." "Oh. Is that so?" Fairy Xingyue shrugged and said, "I'm afraid you're mistaken. I didn't use any magical power. This is just my experience." Xiao Hua nodded. "Senior, you're right. I understand." Then, Xiao Hua pointed at the 6-star spatial fragment in the distance and said, "There's only 1 6-star spatial fragment within a dozen miles of the left. The 6-star spatial fragment is very magical. Any spatial fragment that collides with it will turn into 6 wisps of aura. These 6 wisps of aura are easy to balance with each other. Other shapes don't have this characteristic. I think, this 6-star spatial fragment is safer." Xiao Hua only said that he was guessing and did not say what he had seen. Su Ji's cold face relaxed slightly. He nodded and said, "According to our previous experience, the normal shapes, such as rectangular and square, are similar to the fragments of the Thousand Demons' sacred realm. The strange line-like fragments are the fragments of the ancient desolation. The hexagonal, heptagonal, or other more complicated shapes should be similar to the fragments of the immortal world, the demon league, and even the dragon realm. And according to our experience, the fragments with complicated shapes are usually at the back. We won't choose such a fragment for the first time." Fairy Xingyue added. Hearing Fairy Xingyue mention experience, Su Ji looked up at her and smiled bitterly. It was just a little late. Their previous experience was already unreliable. What was the use of mentioning experience now? Maybe there's a transmission channel in this fragment. Xiao Hua said optimistically. "Senior, how should we go in? Are we just going to fly in like that?" Of course not. That's courting death. Fairy Xingyue shook her head and took out a magic weapon that looked like an astrolabe from her soft armor. She looked around and took a few steps sideways. Then, she looked around again and took 2 more steps forward. Xiaohua noticed that there was a flame flashing in Fairy Xingyue's right eye. Although the flame had a strong aura of starlight, Xiaohua could see clearly that there were also very few green threads of light in it. Forbidden power. Xiaohua narrowed his eyes. He knew that Su Ji was not exaggerating. In order to destroy the Tao, the immortals, Buddhas, and demons could join forces to wipe out the Tao sect cultivators from the 3 continents. Immortal Emperor Gaochen could also raise the Tao sect cultivators like dogs in the Penglai immortal realm. Since the immortals of the immortal world regarded soul cultivation as a taboo, they would definitely have more powerful and violent means to deal with matters related to soul cultivation. Then, why did the immortal world regard soul cultivation as a taboo power? Judging from the few traces of green seal script in Fairy Xingyue's cultivation method, which was similar to the immortal world's cultivation method, Xiaohua knew that soul cultivation could connect heaven and earth and make ghosts and gods weep. Thinking of this, Xiaohua could not help but send a voice transmission. Senior, still have a question that I want to ask you. Hearing Xiaohua's voice transmission, Su Ji frowned and said, since you shouldn't ask, then, don't ask. Even if you ask, I won't answer. Alas, I know I shouldn't ask. But the problem is, apart from you, I really can't find anyone in the 3 continents to ask. Xiaohua said helplessly. And, you're the only person in the world that I can trust. I've already told you that no one in the world can be trusted. Including me. Su Ji replied mercilessly. However, Su Ji thought for a moment and said, if you think you have to ask, you can ask, but I can decide not to answer. Okay. Xiaohua nodded hurriedly. Looking at Fairy Xingyue, who was wandering in the starry sky, he asked, I've seen the devil world's devil emperor sacrifice millions of blood spirits. He wanted to borrow the souls of those blood spirits. I don't understand. What's the use of these souls? Of course, in our Taoist Dharma spells, refining our natal Dharma treasures and cultivating the nascent soul out of the body also require the power of souls. I know this, but I don't understand. With so many souls, what kind of divine ability can you cultivate? You should ask the devil race this question. Su Ji did not want to answer Xiaohua's question. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. He himself had a demon lord's little brother, and this little brother was a pure demon clan's devil spirit. He also had the devil blade murder, but Xiaohua was clear in his heart that the demon clan devoured souls and raised them based on their instincts. They really didn't know the true use of souls, or perhaps only a higher realm than the demon realm would know. Seeing Xiaohua's bitter smile, Su Ji seemed to be unable to bear it. He thought for a moment and said, the human race often says that human nature is the most complicated thing in the world. Then this soul is the most mysterious thing in the world. Even immortals don't dare to touch the power of souls. Let's put it this way. The foundation of the Buddhist sect's 9 transformations golden body is reincarnation, and the foundation of reincarnation is the soul. The foundation of the Buddhist sect's golden body and Buddha fruit is faith. Faith is a manifestation of the power of souls. Just this manifestation has created the Buddhist sect, a Buddhist sect that can compete with the Taoist sect. How big of an impact do you think the power of souls will have? Oh, Xiaohua, what do you think is the most primitive power of souls? Chapter 45:11. Of course, Xiaohua knew that the answer Su Ji was talking about was probably the soul. However, he thought about it and answered in the opposite way, from what I know, it should be pure physical strength. Yes, you're right. Su Ji nodded. Whether it's the human race, the demon race, the spirit race, the devil race, or the divine race and the holy light race that you don't know about, they all admit that the most primitive power in this world is the physical strength. Of course, the physical bodies of the other races may be different from the physical bodies of the human race. However, as far as I know, an immortal king who once came into contact with the forbidden power said that the most primitive power in this world is probably the soul power. Because the soul was formed long before the physical body can decay, but the soul exists forever. Junior understands. Xiao Hua nodded. You don't understand. Su Ji interrupted Xiao Hua unceremoniously and continued to explain, I don't know if you know about the underworld. The underworld has the power of the dead, which is also a part of the soul power. The power of the dead is the nemesis of all magic power, immortal power, and Buddhist power. The underworld is not a simple world. It is the place where all life is annihilated and where all life sprouts. Even someone as strong as the heavenly lord of punishment of the punishment palace, doesn't dare to provoke the underworld because the underworld has a part of the soul power. Xiao Hua, Taoists can become immortals by cultivating spells, Confucian cultivators can ascend to heaven by cultivating Confucian techniques, Buddhists can cultivate the 9 transformations golden body, demons can break through the starry sky by tempering their demonic bodies, then, those who can control the soul power, can cultivate gods. Gods? Xiao Hua pretended to be surprised. Gods, what are they? Can they also be cultivated? Su Ji didn't answer. He saw that Fairy Xingyu had stopped and turned to look at him. He nodded at Fairy Xingyu and stared at Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua, this is my last sentence. In the future, don't ask any other immortals such questions. Gods may be the end of the immortals' cultivation, or the end of the demon league, the immortal world, and the heavenly court. However, no immortal knows, whether or not, he will be a god at the end of his cultivation. Because there is a saying in the immortal world, gods can never be cultivated. Only the ancient times had gods. In the current era, there are no more miracles, and no more gods. So, Xiao Hua, there's no need to talk about taboo energy in the future. After saying that, Su Ji moved and landed beside Fairy Xingyue. He asked, Xingyue, are you ready? Yes, I can activate it now. Fairy Xingyue nodded and said, however, I need a breath of immortal qi. I just changed my body, so I can't activate the immortal mark. Then let me do it. Su Ji raised his hand to take the astrolabe, but Fairy Xingyue said worriedly, you just used a similar immortal technique. Can your body withstand it? Didn't I just say it? I don't need this body anymore. It won't be a problem. Su Ji indifferently said and took the star plate. Then he shouted to Xiao Hua who was in a daze, Xiao Hua, quickly come over, we are about to enter. After saying that, Su Ji raised his eyebrows again. He looked at the distant starry sky and saw a fat figure. He snorted coldly and said, you're fast. It's only been a moment. I'm afraid you've already killed a few more people. Of course he doesn't care about other people's lives. Fairy Xingyue also said coldly, he only cares about his own life. Xiao Hua was a little shocked by Su Ji's words. At this time, he had just come to his senses. He turned his head and looked at the body of the Buddha occupied by the Grand Mist Ancestor. He suddenly understood and sighed, I'd rather betray the world than let the world betray me. Let's go, I don't want to see this filthy thing. Su Ji raised his hand and threw the astrolabe into the air. He spat a mouthful of immortal qi on the astrolabe. The astrolabe did not change, but Su Ji's face began to look old. His sideburns were stained with white frost, and his face was full of wrinkles. Seeing this, Xiao Hua was suddenly shocked and felt a chill run down his back. The warning of the Huda Stockade's elder Wu rang in his ears again. Su Ji's words just now also rang in his ears. He thought with a trembling heart, I don't know, if my body is worth the trust in Su Ji's heart. Su Ji's celestial spiritual qi landed on the astrolabe, and a silvery white brilliance appeared on the astrolabe. Layers of mysterious markings rushed out from the brilliance, and these markings were formed by densely packed runes. As the markings flew out, Su Ji rubbed his hands together, and thick crystal lights fell into the astrolabe. The markings then turned into hundreds of flying birds, and these birds had starlight engraved on their foreheads. Their eyes were like crescent moons, and when their wings flapped, the sound of wind and thunder could be heard. Go! Su Ji waved his sleeve. The hundreds of birds flew into the meteor belt with a quack-quack sound. Let's go. We'll use the simplest flying technique. Su Ji returned the astrolabe to Fairy Xingyu and put his hands behind his back. A faint cloud appeared under his feet, and he rushed into the meteor belt with the birds. Fairy Xingyu took the astrolabe, raised her slender hand, and pointed at different places on the astrolabe. The astrolabe emitted several layers of obscure fluctuations, directing the birds to fly in an extremely zigzagging direction. However, after flying for hundreds of feet, the bird in front exploded with a boom. The birds behind it immediately flapped their tails and flew in another direction beautifully. The fierce interrealm storm around them was like the night wind, causing the feathers of the birds to tremble slightly. Xiao Hua and the others naturally followed the birds and flew in another direction. The six-star space fragment looked very close, but it was extremely far away. After flying for the time it took for an incense stick to burn, one of the hundreds of birds would be destroyed in a short while. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, there were less than 20 birds left. Looking at the six-star-shaped space fragment again, it seemed to still be flickering with faint starlight in the distance. Su Ji said in a low voice, "Every realm has an edge. There's never an endless thing. The reason why it feels endless is because you're in the realm. As long as you're in the realm, if you don't have a magical power that transcends the realm, even if you reach the edge of the realm, you still won't be able to see the realm. So, you'll feel that the realm is endless. These space fragments come from different realms. The aura of each realm is different, and the aura of the fragments won't merge. Therefore, you can see each space fragment as an independent realm. You're in the meteor belt, so you can also see a larger space fragment. If you can't find a way to enter the space fragment, it will always keep a distance from you." Su Ji. Fairy Xingyu said with some dissatisfaction, "Didn't you say that you can't reveal too much about the immortal divinity? You can't reveal too much about the immortal realm to Xiao Hua. How can you casually tell Xiao Hua about the immortal realm? This is just to broaden his horizons. It's not considered teaching him the mysteries of the immortal realm." Su Ji said disapprovingly, "Besides, he's already seen the seven-colored shell. Do you think he didn't get anything from it?" "He he." Xiao Hua smiled and asked, "Fairy, I have a question, but I don't know if I should ask it." "Don't ask." Fairy Xingyu hurriedly waved her hand and said, "Your question must involve the immortal realm again." "Okay then." Xiao Hua shrugged and immediately stopped asking. However, a smile had already appeared at the corner of his mouth. Sure enough, after a while, Fairy Xingyu urged again, "What are you asking? Why aren't you talking?" "He he." Xiao Hua blinked and asked, "Senior, you came from the Palace of Justice. You must know the various realms very well." "I don't know." Fairy Xingyu shook her head like a rattledrum. "I'm just occasionally ordered by the Palace of Justice to check some things. I've met the demon clan of the 10,000 demon realm who broke through the realms in the Dawn Rain continent. I've also met the seven-colored sea god shell from the Red Sea domain in the Thousand Demons sacred realm. Well, the two seniors are also from the immortal realm. I'm very curious. Why is it so easy to break through the realms?" Xiao Hua ignored Fairy Xingyu's shaking of her head and asked seriously, "Didn't Senior Su just say that it's difficult to break through the realms in the realms? It's naturally difficult to break through the ordinary realms, but the three continents are a bit special." Fairy Xingyu was a female immortal after all, so she couldn't help showing off a little. However, she only said half a sentence and stopped. She raised her hand and pointed at the six-star space fragment that still looked very far away. Look again. Is it close to that space fragment? Okay. Xiaohua knew that Fairy Xingyu wouldn't say anything else, so he had no choice but to prepare to activate his delusion breaker Dharma Eye. However, before he activated it, he suddenly thought of something and said with a smile, "Fairy, I don't know any special spells. Of course, I can't see any clues. Everything still depends on your magic power." Fairy Xingyu glanced at Xiaohua and rolled her eyes at him. Then, she spat out a mouthful of quintessential essence at the astrolabe in her hand. Swoosh! A pillar of stars rushed out of the astrolabe and caught up with the few remaining birds in front of them. Caw! The birds cried out sadly and turned into fireflies. Then, the entire pillar of stars swept toward the space fragment like a whirlwind. Poof, poof, poof. The sound of explosions came from the pillar of stars. The aura of the realms had hit the pillar of stars and made it full of holes. However, the shattered pillar of stars also revealed a safe path at this time and fell into the brilliance of the space fragment. Su Ji was still in front. His figure followed the pillar of stars and fell into the brilliance. Xiaohua could clearly see that Su Ji's figure was getting smaller and smaller. Xiaohua watched Su Ji's figure shrink. Outside the meteor belt in the distance, the fat figure of the Grand Mist Ancestor appeared again. The Grand Mist Ancestor squinted and watched Xiaohua and the other two shrink and fall into the hexagonal space fragment with a solemn expression on his face. Chapter 45:12. The Grand Mist Ancestor originally wanted to fly over and enter the meteor belt with Xiaohua and the others. However, when he saw Su Ji spurting out immortal spiritual energy and activating the astrolabe, he stopped in the distance. It was only when Xiaohua and the others flew in that he quickly flew over. He looked at the backs of the three people and thought to himself, although this person looks a little unfamiliar, the way he activates the astrolabe is exactly the same as that person. If I'm not mistaken, it's him. Humph, since he's still alive, why didn't he save me? This kind of senior, it's fine if I don't recognize him. With that thought, the Grand Mist Ancestor waved his fat monk robe. Two balls of black and white air flew out and turned into thousands of thin threads in the meteor belt. These thin threads seemed to have intelligence and were rapidly drawn into the turbulent flow of the realm. They were either torn apart or moved against the flow. In just a moment, the turbulent flow that was invisible to the naked eye and divine sense was clearly revealed to the Grand Mist Ancestor. He watched as the black and white thread spread further and gradually covered the space fragments within a dozen li. The black and white threads were indeed effective. Wherever there was a dead end, the black and white threads would cut off randomly. Wherever there was a way out, the threads would rapidly extend and reveal the path of light. Seeing this, the Grand Mist Ancestor smiled proudly. This old man has the yin-yang illustration manual. In this Star-Moon Palace, there's nothing that can stop me. With that said, the Grand Mist Ancestor's figure flickered as he stepped onto the black and white thread. The black and white thread immediately turned into a cloud that carried him towards the nearest light path. When the Grand Mist Ancestor's figure gradually shrank, the figures of the scholarly cultivators and the great monsters of the demon race appeared. Xiaohua followed Fairy Xingyu and flew along the pillar of stars. The pillar of stars in front of the realm's aura presented a very strange distorted shape. It was like a fried dough twist with 6 revolutions. 3 of the revolutions were blurry and indistinguishable by the time they reached the space. The remaining 3 were crooked as they probed into the space's brilliance. As for the pillar of stars, it was destroyed by the realm's aura. In front of the 2 was Su Ji. Su Ji seemed to be very familiar with this situation. Without any hesitation, not only did he fly with the pillar of stars, he also spun with the pillar of stars. In fact, there were many times when he was still facing down in Xiaohua's eyes. Xiaohua didn't dare to act rashly. His entire body followed the rotation of the star pillar. He didn't dare to be careless at all. After circling around a few times, Xiaohua suddenly heard a rumbling sound beside his ears. In a flash, the hexagonal spatial fragment that wasn't too far from him suddenly appeared in front of him. The hexagonal fragment had already disappeared, and what entered his eyes was only an enormous light shadow. This light shadow was like a huge dome of heaven, covering the entire space. Moreover, under this dome of heaven, there were several kinds of indescribable auras. These auras interweaved together, blocking the light shadow. However, within the light and shadow, the star pillar had already pierced into the light and shadow, and a series of phantoms that resembled doors appeared in the light and shadow. At this time, Su Ji had already stopped. His hands moved slightly, and streaks of water-blue thunderbolts appeared like horned dragons, slowly rolling up and down his body. Fairy Xingyu's face was also solemn. She raised her hand slightly, put away the astrolabe, and took out a magic weapon that looked like a crescent moon. The soft armor on her body also emitted starlight, and a faintly discernible restriction protected her body. Xiaohua. Su Ji called out without turning his head. Take out your magic weapon. I don't know what kind of space is inside this spatial fragment, and I don't know which realm this fragment came from. Yes. As Xiaohua spoke, he took out the Tingjiao shears from his bosom. Under the urging of his magic power, the entire Tingjiao shears emitted a dazzling golden light. Seeing this dazzling golden light swimming in Xiaohua's hand like a dragon, Fairy Xingyu couldn't help but exclaim, "What a treasure!" Xiaohua, I really didn't expect you to have a capital spiritual treasure. It's a pity that this capital spiritual treasure is somewhat incomplete. I was lucky. Xiaohua said with a smile. I snatched it from the Xiaoyu continent. That person took half of it that day, and I don't know where the other half is. It's good that you can use it. Su Ji didn't say much. He watched as the shadow of the star pillar crashed into the space gradually solidified. He shouted, Xingyue, Xiaohua, let's rush in. Okay. Fairy Xingyu and Xiaohua shouted in unison, urging their figures to rush toward the shadow of the door at the same time. Boom. Just as Xiaohua rushed into the light shadow, he felt that his surroundings were surrounded by clouds and mist, followed by the sound of thunder. Bolts of heavenly lightning fell on top of his head like the Milky Way spilling out. Moreover, there was an inexplicable pressure on Xiaohua's body. This pressure was so great that it felt as if the whole world was pressing down on his shoulders, making it difficult for him to move. However, this was nothing. The strangest thing was that in addition to the heavy pressure on Xiaohua's body, there were also tens of millions of tiny vortexes trying to drill into Xiaohua's body. A sour and painful feeling came from his body. Humph. Xiaohua snorted coldly and urged his transcendent's golden body. While his body was flowing with golden light, his figure continued to expand. Swish swish. Without waiting for Xiaohua to straighten his back, two silvery white human-shaped lights that were at least 3,000 meters long appeared in front of his head. Moreover, from those lights, there was a kind of pressure that made Xiaohua feel fear. It surged towards Xiaohua like a surging tide, blocking Xiaohua's mouth and nose. Moreover, the pressure was like a mountain pressing down. Xiaohua's Mahayana cultivator's pressure couldn't help but be stimulated, and he tried his best to resist. However, this pressure was nothing more than a pellet in front of the mountain-like pressure. There was no way it could compare at all. Large beads of sweat dripped down from Xiaohua's temples. Xiaohua's straight body was slightly bent as an irresistible fear arose spontaneously. This is the fragment of the immortal realm. Fairy Xingyu was a little puzzled, a little surprised, and screamed with ecstasy. Don't be in such a hurry to look at the fragment. Su Ji's calm voice sounded. We didn't expect that the first fragment to be the same space as the immortal realm. Our top priority now is to quickly stabilize the immortal chi in our bodies. Don't strengthen it anymore, or our bodies won't be able to support it. Oh, quickly restrain your pressure. Xiaohua doesn't have any consciousness, so he can't resist our spiritual pressure. As he spoke, the mountain-like pressure gradually shrank and fell into the silvery light. Only then did Xiaohua breathe a sigh of relief. He opened his mouth to say something in a hoarse voice, but the abundant immortal qi rushed into his mouth and nose again. This immortal qi was of a much higher level than the yuan qi of heaven and earth in the three continents. When it rushed into Xiaohua's mouth and nose, it immediately caused discomfort in his body. He didn't know how many years he had not felt choking on water, but it rushed into his head. Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly held his breath and condensed his qi, urging the Dharma power in his body to create a defense on the surface of his body. Before he could urge his Dharma power, Su Ji's voice sounded from the silvery light. His voice was like a thunderclap that resounded through the entire space. Xiaohua, don't urge your Dharma power. All your spells now are based on the yuan qi of heaven and earth in the three continents. This is a fragment of the realm similar to the immortal realm. The immortal qi inside is similar to the immortal realm. When this immortal qi comes into contact with spells based on the yuan qi of heaven and earth, it will change. If it's light, it will destroy the spell. If it's heavy, it will cause a backlash and invade your body. Okay. Xiaohua didn't speak and hurriedly nodded. Then, from another silvery human figure, an object that emitted the brilliance of the stars and moon flew out. Fairy Xing Yu's voice also sounded from it. Humph, I hate stingy people like you the most. I don't believe that you don't have a protective heavenly spiritual treasure. If it weren't for the fact that this is a fragment of the immortal realm and I'm afraid that your body would explode from the immortal qi, I wouldn't have bothered to give you my immortal armor. The object landed in front of Xiaohua. It was a very simple and crude star armor. This star armor was refined from some strange star stones. Between the star stones were some crystal threads that were as thin as hair. These crystal threads not only strung the star stones together, but they also flashed with traces of cold light, looking very sharp. Xiaohua took the star armor and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After all, this was Fairy Xing Yu's star armor. How could he, a male cultivator, wear it? This suspicion. He still had to avoid it. You can't activate this star armor now. Su Ji's voice sounded. Put it on first. I'll activate it for you. Since Su Ji didn't say anything, Xiaohua could only obey. He threw the star armor, which fell like a fishing net. The 100 or so star stones on the star armor covered Xiaohua's body. Xiaohua deliberately looked at his chest. Fortunately, there weren't any extra star stones. Gotcha. Hundreds of silver-white thunderbolts appeared in the silver figure that Su Ji was in and gathered on every star stone on the star armor. Rumble. The star armor actually rumbled like a Dharma treasure. The 100 or so star stones turned into the shape of stars and began to rotate. The immortal qi nearby also let out a cheerful cry and crashed into the stars. In just a moment, the stars turned into pieces and the entire star armor turned into a strange armor that covered Xiaohua's body. Once the armor was formed, the corrosion from the immortal qi disappeared immediately. The corrosion on his mouth and nose also disappeared. Xiaohua looked at the armor that was flowing with starlight and moved his hands and feet. He frowned slightly. This was because his body didn't have any special discomfort in the ruins or the primitive continent. Why were there so many abnormalities in this fragment of the immortal realm? Gotcha. Xiaohua's problem was solved. Tens of thousands of tiny thunderbolts appeared around the silver figure that Su Ji was in. These thunderbolts were like horned dragons that surrounded the silver figure and rotated crazily. The silver figure also gradually shrank with the rotation of the thunderbolts. At the same time, a resplendent galaxy flew out from the silver figure of another silver figure and also rotated from top to bottom. Every time it rotated, some of the silver light fell into the galaxy. The silver light that was thousands of feet in size shrank almost simultaneously with Su Ji's silver light. Chapter 45:13. After the time it took to burn an incense stick, Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu's bodies were revealed again, but this time, they were different from before. Not only were there silver scars all over their bodies, but there were also lightning and starlight flowing through these scars, as if they were trying to stop these scars from spreading. The armor that they had worn before was also faintly flashing between the silver spots, looking erratic. The strangest thing was their faces. In the beginning, their faces were replaced by a flickering silver light. Later on, their faces gradually appeared. However, some parts of their faces were that of humans, while some parts were covered by silver light. It looked extremely strange. In the end, their faces were completely revealed. However, from time to time, their faces would be covered by the silver light. When their faces were revealed, there was nothing special about them. However, when they were covered by the silver light, a kind of majesty and respect was involuntarily emitted, forcing Xiaohua to move slightly. Presumably. Behind the star armor, Xiaohua slightly narrowed his eyes and thought to himself, this is the true appearance of an immortal. Phew. Su Ji let out a long breath, looking even more nervous than Xiaohua. Fairy Xingyu raised her arm, shook it a few times, and said, this body is really tiring. The feeling of freedom just now was really good. Yes. Su Ji nodded. When we were in the immortal realm, we never felt that there was anything abnormal about it. But after leaving the immortal realm, we realized the benefits of an immortal body. There's a saying in my hometown, when you're not sick, you're not sick. When you're sick, you realize the importance of health. Let's go quickly. Fairy Xingyu said with a smile. I can't wait. This time, we have to find the passage back to the immortal realm no matter what. Xiaohua. Su Ji nodded, looked at Xiaohua, and asked, can you still adapt? It's okay for now. Xiaohua nodded. However, I don't know what role I can play in this fragment of the immortal realm. In this fragment of the immortal realm, you're just a mortal. Fairy Xingyu said with a smile. Your magic arts, magic treasures, and other things can't be used. Even if it could be used, its effect would not be comparable to an immortal artifact. Oh, don't rashly open your Qiankuan pouch here. Be careful that the immortal spiritual energy inside your Qiankuan pouch will burst. As for your Kunlun mirror, it should be usable, but I can't guarantee that it won't be damaged if you don't refine it with immortal qi. Forget it, forget it. Xiaohua waved his hand and said, just treat me as an idle person. With two real immortals following me, what do I have to be afraid of? Hee hee. Fairy Xingyue covered her mouth and giggled. Then let's make a cupboard. After saying that, Fairy Xingyu released her lingering thoughts, wanting to look into the distance. Su Ji hurriedly stopped her and said, Xingyue, it's better to be careful. Don't release too many lingering thoughts. Got it. Goddess Xingyu smiled sweetly. Coincidentally, her appearance was covered by the silver light. A sweet smile seemed to pass through the space and into Xiaohua's mind. Fairy Xingyu did not release her lingering thoughts into the distance. Her figure flew slowly. Su Ji waved his sleeve and covered Xiaohua's body. He said, let's go. And followed Fairy Xingyu. After flying for a while, Fairy Xingyu released her star shuttle with a wave of her hand. At this time, the star shuttle was even more majestic than before. Tens of thousands of starlight rushed into the sky and fell in all directions, like a dazzling meteor shower. However, after a while, the starlight withered and disappeared into thin air. Fairy Xingyu's face changed drastically as she looked at Su Ji. Su Ji frowned slightly but did not care. He raised his hand and pointed ahead. The two of them flew over with Xiaohua. Xiaohua looked a little absent-minded. He did not pay attention to Fairy Xingyu's star shuttle. He was puzzled by the smile that Fairy Xingyu transmitted into his mind. What are immortals? I have never seen immortals before, so I have never thought about this question. Now that these two exiled immortals have been here for a long time, they feel that immortals are similar to us. But today, when I really came to the fragment of the immortal world, I realized that immortals are completely different from us mortals. In Tao sect cultivation, the physical body is extremely important. It is also the foundation of becoming an immortal. Without a physical body, one cannot ascend to the immortal world. Previously, I thought that it was because the immortal spirit chi was different from the heaven and earth origin chi. If it were not for the protection of the physical body, the nascent soul would be destroyed by the immortal spirit chi. But now, it seems that if the physical body has not been cleansed by the spirit cleansing pool, it cannot withstand the immortal spirit chi. Then, how can I protect my nascent soul? Moreover, Su Ji had said before that even if I lost my physical body, as long as I cultivated my scattered soul to the 9 tribulations, I would be able to grow a physical body. Naturally, I would be able to enter the spirit cleansing pool and grow a physical body. It seems that, the spirit cleansing pool is the most important thing. The spirit cleansing liquid in the spirit cleansing pool. What is it? What is the difference between it and the dragon cleansing liquid in the dragon cleansing pool? Xiao Hua's question could only be a question. Not to mention that he could not find any answers now, even if he asked Su Ji would probably not answer him. However, in a short moment, he had a new question. He looked at the ground that whistled past. On the ground, there were either deep ravines or undulating mountain ranges. It seemed that everything on the ground was much larger than the 3 continents. He asked curiously, Senior, Junior has 2 questions to ask. Su Ji looked ahead and answered expressionlessly. Senior said before that the so-called realm. As long as one is within it, one will not be able to see the edge. We've entered this spatial fragment, so how can we find the way out? Xiao Hua asked. The spatial fragments in the meteor belt are all incomplete. They were used by people with great ability to set up defenses when the Star Moon Palace was refined in the ancient times. Once we find the location of the other incomplete part of the spatial fragment, we will be able to see the meteor belt. From there, we can fly to the other spatial fragment. Su Ji answered fluently. However, he stopped at this point, as if there were some secrets that he did not say. Xiao Hua nodded and asked again. Senior said that there are fragments of realms parallel to the 1,000 demons sacred realm, fragments of realms parallel to the immortal realm, and fragments of realms parallel to the ancient times. This time, when we enter the fragment of realms parallel to the immortal realm, the immortal chi inside is extremely dense. Even with Junior's strength, I can't withstand it. How can the cultivators who followed Senior in the past withstand it? Actually, it's like this. Su Ji said without any hesitation, although I don't have a space or a spatial immortal weapon, I still have the heaven and earth bracelet. Under normal circumstances, I respect the wishes of those cultivators and bring them here to gain experience. If an accident really happens, I will definitely keep them in the heaven and earth bracelet. Although staying in the heaven and earth bracelet is an insult to the human race, it's still better than losing their lives. Of course, if I didn't make it in time, like just now, they would have lost their lives. I don't have any good ideas. After all, Xing Yu's star armor isn't something that just anyone can borrow. Oh, also. Su Ji continued, previously, we also encountered some fragments of realms parallel to the immortal realm. However, the immortal chi inside those fragments was already thin. Although it was somewhat dangerous, it was far from being as serious as today. Also. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and asked again. Didn't you have 2 questions? Su Ji asked curiously. Xiao Hua smiled. Junior has thought of another problem. Say it. Su Ji nodded, know what you know, don't know what you don't know, you are suitable to be a Confucian cultivator. Senior said so. Xiaohua asked, there are also fragments of realms parallel to the ancient times. Then, the immortal realm should be of a higher level than the immortal realm, right? Yes, the immortal realm usually calls the immortal realm the immortal realm. Su Ji replied. Then, Xiaohua asked, Senior and the others entered the fragment of the immortal realm, did their bodies feel uncomfortable? What about those lower-level disciples? At this moment, Su Ji showed a rare hesitation. After a moment, Su Ji opened his mouth, Xiaohua, this question. I can answer you. But I don't know if my answer is correct because I have never been to the immortal realm and I don't know what the ancient times were like. I also don't know what the ancient times were like when the Star Moon Palace was refined. I only know that some fragments are similar to the three continents and the realms below the immortal realm. Some fragments are similar to the immortal realm, the Demon League and the Heavenly Court. And some fragments are different from these two places. So Xingyue and I think, listen carefully, we think that these fragments might be fragments of the ancient times. But whether these fragments are fragments of the ancient times or not, we don't know. And in these fragments, our bodies didn't change, and the bodies of those lower-level disciples didn't change either. I also don't know what I am talking about, do you understand? Yes, Junior understands. Although the doubts in Xiaohua's heart grew stronger, he still heaved a sigh of relief. Are you sure you understand? Su Ji asked curiously, I won't hide it from you. I thought about this before, but this matter has nothing to do with cultivation and returning to the immortal realm. I just thought about it and threw it away. And, this junior thinks so too. Xiaohua said with a smile, this junior just had a sudden whim. Then, the two of them fell silent. They flew forward silently. Xiaohua didn't know what Su Ji was thinking, but he knew that although Su Ji was an immortal, Su Ji didn't understand the ancient times as well as Xiaohua. Not only had Xiaohua been to the immortal realm, but Xiaohua's Fortune Gate disciples had also been there. When those 5th grade Essence Force disciples were in the immortal realm, their bodies didn't go through any special tempering, and they also didn't experience the same problem as today. And Xiaohua's body, which was a half-god body, was actually corroded by the immortal spiritual energy. This was something that Xiaohua couldn't understand. Chapter 45-14. After a long while, Fairy Xingyu saw some colorful lights filling the sky in front of her. She said in surprise, Su Ji, look, there is still light in this space fragment. Maybe there is an ancient cave residence. Our opportunity has come. Don't be careless. Su Ji hurriedly reminded her. The more abodes there are, the more celestial beasts there will be. You must be careful. I know. Do I need you to tell me that? Fairy Xingyu said indifferently and sped up again. As if reminded by the light, Su Ji hesitated and said, Xiaohua, I think the problem you mentioned just now is like this. Before Taoist cultivators ascend to become celestials, they rely on the qi of heaven and earth to cultivate. When they reach the celestial realm, they will not be able to adapt to the celestial spiritual qi. As for the celestials in the celestial realm, low-level celestials such as mortal fairies also rely on the celestial spiritual qi to cultivate. When they reach the high level, they will no longer rely on the celestial spiritual qi. Presumably, in the untainted divine realm, the foundation of cultivation is also different. Therefore, the cultivators will be troubled by the celestial spiritual qi in the fragment of the celestial realm. But in the fragment of the untainted divine realm, there will be no such confusion, right? What do high-level celestials rely on to cultivate? Xiaohua asked, hitting the nail on the head. Alas, that's why I don't want to answer your question. Su Ji sighed. You haven't cultivated to that level yet. It's really not good for you to know too much. After that, Su Ji stopped talking and flew ahead with Xiaohua. Xiaohua had no choice but to shut up. After another 10 minutes, the light was in sight. Under the light, there was neither a spiritual vein nor an abode, but a vast expanse of tall palaces that stretched as far as the eye could see. These palaces were tens of thousands of feet tall, but all of them were damaged or collapsed. If it weren't for the extremely beautiful light emitted by these palaces, they wouldn't be much different from the ruins of the mortal world. As they flew closer, Xiaohua saw that the ground around the palaces was covered with deep cracks and deep holes. These cracks and deep holes were obviously caused by a fight. Next to these cracks, there were some broken celestial artifacts scattered around. This. Fairy Xingyu looked at Su Ji in surprise. Su Ji also looked surprised. The two of them sped up again. Hiss. In just a moment, not to mention Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu, even Xiaohua could not help but gasp. Because right before the overturned wreckage, there were already many wreckages of several thousand feet in length lying on the ground. These corpses were different from the corpses of the human clan. Most of them were wearing armors and holding some fairy weapons in their hands. Inside the armors, there was either nothing or some shells that looked like tree roots. Of course, there were also some corpses that had collapsed beyond recognition. Something's wrong. Su Ji suddenly growled. He raised his hand and a spear-like immortal artifact fell into his hand. He glanced at the bottom of the immortal artifact and exclaimed, "Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion. How is this possible?" Fairy Xingyu exclaimed as if she had seen a ghost. She also raised her hand and another empty armor fell into her hand. When she looked at the mark on the inside of the armor, her face was as incredulous as Su Ji's. How is this possible? Then, Su Ji threw Xiaohua to the ground and said, "Stay here and don't move. Remember, don't move. This is very important." After that, without waiting for Xiaohua to answer, he rushed toward the dilapidated palaces in the distance. Of course, Fairy Xingyu was no exception. Her figure flashed, faster than the light shadow, almost surpassing Su Ji's figure. "Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion." Xiaohua naturally heard Su Ji's exclamation. He did not understand what this Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion was. However, judging from the reactions of the two immortals, one was a law enforcer and the other was a law enforcer, this so-called Heavenly Mansion was definitely a famous place in the immortal realm. Moreover, since the two immortals did not want to go in with him, there must be some so-called secret of the immortal realm inside. Xiaohua naturally knew to stay where he was. Of course, Xiaohua only stood there for a moment before he came to his senses. Damn it, that's not right. This Xingyu palace was refined in ancient times. Since Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu know about this Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion, this space fragment must have been left behind from the immortal realm in ancient times. In that case. Thinking of this, a smile appeared on Xiaohua's face. In that case, this Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion must be a secret place in ancient times. There are endless secrets hidden inside. Damn it, this space fragment is a huge gold mine. Since I've already entered the gold mine, how can I return empty-handed? Since he knew that this collapsed palace was a famous secret of the immortal realm in ancient times, how could Xiaohua still stand in the distance obediently? He rolled his eyes and activated the flying technique of the soul cultivator. He stuck close to the ground and walked to another place. As he walked, he sensed his own space. Sure enough, as Fairy Xingyu had said, he could already sense his space here. Everything in the space could be taken out. Xiaohua even tried to put an empty armor and immortal weapon into the space. He could do the same. However, the armor and immortal weapon were not located in the original Shenhua continent. Therefore, Xiaohua kept some armor and immortal weapons into the space as he walked. Xiaohua also noticed some things like bracelets, rings, and storage bags. He did not even look at them. They were all put into the space. Xiaohua was already used to stealing things. It had even become a technique. There were many bodies lying on the ground outside the palace. They were either dense or sparse. When they were sparse, Xiaohua only took those bracelets, belts, and the like. When they were dense, Xiaohua took 4 out of 10 of them. This made it so that the density would become sparse and not arouse suspicion. Damn, these are all immortal weapons. The more Xiaohua walked, the more excited he became. This feeling of reaping without sowing was really rare and wonderful. However, after walking for a while, he didn't see Su Ji and Fairy Xingyue. Xiaohua walked to the other side of the hall. When he got there, Xiaohua suddenly stopped. He closed his eyes and seemed to be thinking. After a moment, he suddenly looked into the distance and thought to himself, that's not right. Previously, in front of the palace, those armors. Oh, I'll take it as the place where the immortals fell. The immortals seem to have fallen in one direction, as if, in the direction where I came from. These immortals seem to be blocking another pair of immortals. The direction of these immortals was similar to the direction where I came from. Moreover, there are more belts and rings here. These immortal weapons are also of a higher level. Could it be? Could it be? Thinking about this, Xiaohua wanted to release his divine sense, but after a short moment, Xiaohua shrugged his shoulders and said with a low chuckle, this Xiao came here as a mortal. Not only do I have no divine sense, I also have no magic power. I can't even open the storage pouch. All the strange things that have happened here have nothing to do with me. No matter what happens, I'm the most innocent. Xiaohua smiled. He carefully identified the direction and walked in one direction. Along the way, he used his mind to store all the immortal weapons, armors, and immortal slips into his space. Sure enough, in the time it took to finish a meal, a bottomless abyss appeared in front of them. Within the abyss, there were many 5-colored clouds. Amidst the clouds, 2 lights that were brighter than the sun floated within the abyss, illuminating the entire abyss. However, the clouds blocked the lights, so they could not be seen from a distance. Oh my God! As soon as Xiaohua approached the abyss, he immediately felt the spiritual pressure in the light shadow that was even more vast than that of Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu. Xiaohua felt as if a heavy hammer had hit his chest. He could not get close at all. This is a big fish. Xiaohua was overjoyed and almost screamed. These must be 2 big shots who fought to the death. Xiaohua did not hesitate and hurriedly released his mind. Sure enough, the spiritual pressure was like a mountain or an ocean, but Xiaohua's mind could still get close. Of course, Xiaohua's mind was just a trickle that could only flow around the light shadow. Even so, Xiaohua could already see that these were 2 shells that were tens of thousands of feet in size. The shells were full of a mixture of golden and silver light. There were also 2 immortal weapons in the light shadow. One was shaped like a knife, and the other was shaped like a spear. However, Xiaohua's mind could not get close to these 2 immortal weapons. Damn it, you're already dead. Why are you still so stingy? Xiaohua knew that these 2 immortals who had perished together were definitely big shots in the immortal world. He gritted his teeth. It seemed that the immortal weapons and other items that he had collected earlier were all scrap metal. No. Xiaohua shouted inwardly. Even if this is a tiger, this Xiao will still pluck the fur from the tiger's tail. Thinking about this, Xiaohua's mind flowed like a stream between the tens of thousands of feet large shell and the armor. His mind, was like a sympathetic person's hand that was extremely affectionate as it gently wandered around the wreckage. It was unwilling to cross over inch by inch. Ha! When Xiaohua's mind passed through the armor and landed on the belt, Xiaohua's mind saw something that looked like a jade seal. Xiaohua did not hesitate at all. His mind moved like a hand and immediately put the jade seal into the space. Immediately after, a thumb-sized jade pillar and a pitch-black box were also put into the space by Xiaohua. When Xiaohua's mind was ready to leave the wreckage, he saw a pendant hanging on the belt. Xiaohua put away the pendant, but he still wanted more. Damn it, if I'm not afraid of being discovered by Su Ji, this belt, tsk tisk, forget it. The other wreckage was similar to this one. It also had a lot of harvest. In addition to the golden seal, there was also a pendant, a 5-claw-like pendant, a multi-pronged jade pillar, and a simple and unadorned key. Chapter 45:15. Phew. After looting the wreckage, Xiaohua let out a long breath and said with a smile, finally, this trip was not in vain. In order not to arouse Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu's suspicion, Xiaohua hurriedly turned around and wanted to leave. However, just as he turned around, he suddenly froze on the spot. He hurriedly released his mind in disbelief. Sure enough, a moment later, Xiaohua revealed a thoughtful expression and thought to himself, it's a little strange. These two, unknown immortals had clearly perished together. However, one of them is holding a weapon in both hands, the other is holding a weapon in one hand, and the other hand. Why is it covering his back armpit? His back armpit is obviously not injured, so why is he covering it there? There must be something he cares about there. Even if he dies, he must protect it. Thinking about this, Xiaohua urged his mind and moved the immortal's hand away and placed it on the ground. Then, his mind penetrated into the armpit of the immortal. It was very strange. The immortal's body was different from the mortal's body. When Xiaohua's mind penetrated into the armpit, the immortal's body actually split open as if it was melting. Then, a 9-colored brilliance bloomed. Within the brilliance, an indescribable polyhedron appeared. It seemed to be in this space, but also seemed to not be in this space. Of course, this brilliance flashed and the polyhedron was immediately taken into the space by Xiaohua. This polyhedron was different from the fairy artifacts that Xiaohua had taken into the space before. It fell into the space that had not been formed before. Seeing that the treasure was in his hands, Xiaohua did not delay at all. He turned around and went to other places to continue searching for armor, fairy artifacts, belts, and other things. Xiaohua originally thought that Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu would find him soon. However, what puzzled him was that Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu did not appear for a full hour. Could it be that there is an even more powerful restriction in this palace? Xiaohua looked at the palace in front of him. Although the huge stone pillars had collapsed, the beautiful stone walls were flashing with brilliance for a long time. Xiaohua had some thoughts in his mind. However, he was very self-aware. If Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu could not escape from the restriction in the palace, how could he? Since he was not empty-handed, why should he take the risk? Especially if there were taboos within this hall, then wouldn't he have touched the bottom line of the immortal dimension? Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu did not fall into a predicament like Xiaohua had imagined. They did not separate, but hurriedly shuttled through the collapsed and dilapidated hall side by side. There were also many corpses in the hall, as well as many precious weapons and other items. However, the two of them did not take a second look at them. They did not dare to release too much of their expanded thoughts and only extended them out a few hundred feet. However, their eyes were different at this time. One of Fairy Xingyu's eyes was like a full moon, while the other was like a bright star. Su Ji's eyes flashed with lightning. The two of them looked at each other with different gazes, as if they were searching for something. They flew into a huge palace. In this palace, there was a huge chair that had been split in half. On the stone wall above the chair, there was a plaque that gave off a milky white light. This plaque was now hanging at a slanted angle, and most of it was already broken. The gazes of the two landed on the signboard at the same time. Their bodies shook violently. At the same time, the silver light hidden under the armor involuntarily rushed out and wrapped around the bodies of the two. A moment later, the figures and faces of the two were once again revealed. Fairy Xingyu was shocked. She rushed to the front of the throne and wanted to take a closer look. However, before she could get close, the throne that had been split in half gave off an awe-inspiring aura, forcing Fairy Xingyu to retreat. She couldn't get close to the throne at all. Fairy Xingyu had no choice but to fly high and try her best to get close to the plaque on the stone wall. After taking a closer look, Fairy Xingyu's body stiffened. After a long while, she whispered, "How is this possible? This is really the Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion. The most mysterious immortal mansion of the legendary Yi Qiong. This immortal mansion. Isn't it in the immortal realm? How did it become a realm fragment of Star Moon Palace? Could it be that the Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion disappeared in ancient times? That's even more impossible." Su Ji shook his head and said, "Yi Qiong is a celestial venerable who became a celestial venerable recently before we fell into the mortal world. His Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion only appeared in the last 20 million years. How could it have disappeared in ancient times? Unless there was another Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion in ancient times, there's no other explanation for it being in Star Moon Palace." Fairy Xingyu deduced without hesitation. Su Ji nodded and said, "That's possible. No one can guarantee that there wasn't another Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion in ancient times. But. Fairy Xingyu hesitated a few times, and her face was full of doubts. She did not say the reason for the "but." There seemed to be endless hesitation in her heart. Su Ji seemed to know what Fairy Xingyu wanted to say. He looked at Fairy Xingyu and opened his mouth, but in the end, he sighed and closed his mouth. Finally, Fairy Xingyu probed, "Su Ji, you've been following me since we entered this heavenly mansion. Are you afraid that there are restrictions in this heavenly mansion and want to protect me?" Su Ji shook his head and said, "This heavenly mansion has been destroyed. How could there be restrictions? Moreover, the heavenly mansion is full of celestial generals who have been killed. Even if there were restrictions, I'm afraid they would have been triggered by them. However, I don't want to be separated from you because I want to protect you. At the same time, I'm also protecting myself." Alas, that's right. Fairy Xingyu also understood what Su Ji meant, but she still did not want to make it clear. She sighed and said, "In that case, you and I. In this heavenly mansion, we can't be separated." "Yes." Su Ji smiled bitterly. "We'll search together and then come here. Then we'll be honest. That's the only way." Fairy Xingyu's smile became even more bitter. It seemed that if she was given another chance, she would definitely not enter this space fragment so easily. Afterwards, the two of them spent another hour walking through most of the halls. Afterwards, they did not touch any of the items or corpses in the halls, and they returned to the main hall. Looking at the throne again, Su Ji said, "Xingyu, I think we're in big trouble." "Alas, yes." Fairy Xingyu stamped her feet in mid-air and said, "This is indeed the mysterious Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion that is widely rumored in the celestial realm. But this heavenly mansion, why would it be in the ancient Star Moon Palace?" "The ancient Star Moon Palace?" Su Ji said with a faint smile, "Who told you this? I'm afraid you came up with it yourself, right?" "Why not?" Fairy Xingyu frowned and said, "Although we found this Star Moon Palace first. The token to open this Star Moon Palace can also be found in the 3 continents. This means that before we came, the Star Moon Palace already existed and someone had already entered. It's just that they probably didn't have your divination skills. After they came in occasionally, they couldn't find any trace of the Star Moon Palace. Even so, it doesn't mean that the Star Moon Palace existed in ancient times, nor does it mean that the space fragments in this meteor belt were refined in the Star Moon Palace in ancient times." Su Ji explained, "This Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion is the best proof. The Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion must have fallen into the Star Moon Palace within 1,000,000 years." Okay. Fairy Xingyu was impatient and waved her hand. "What's the use of saying this now? Let's find the divine cultivation mirror first. The problem is..." Su Ji looked worried. "The divine cultivation mirror is just a legend. Who knows if it really exists? Even immortal King Tu Gong has never admitted it. Su Ji, do you know that there's no smoke without fire? Fairy Xingyu said, if Heavenly Venerate Yi Qiong wasn't immortal King Tu Gong's most trusted Heavenly Venerate, and if he didn't steal the divine cultivation mirror, how could this legend have spread in the celestial realm? If it weren't for this legend, how could the Yi Qiong heavenly mansion disappear from the celestial realm? Even the Palace of Law doesn't know where the Yi Qiong heavenly mansion is. I think. Su Ji shook his head and said, it's better if we don't look for it. How about we pretend that we never came here at all? How is that possible? Fairy Xingyu smiled bitterly and shook her head. From the moment we saw the Yi Qiong heavenly mansion, it was already difficult for us to escape from this strange vortex in the celestial realm. If you don't say it, I won't say it. Well, Xiaohua won't say it either. Plus, he doesn't know where this place is. Even if we return to the celestial realm, who would know that we came to the Yi Qiong heavenly mansion? Su Ji said sincerely. Su Ji, I believe you. I also believe that you will never tell anyone. Fairy Xingyu shook her head. But I don't trust Xiaohua. This guy has too many secrets. I can't guarantee that after he ascends to the celestial realm and hears the legend, he won't think of this place. Plus, I don't believe in myself. If the Palace of Law wants to know what we have done in the mortal world all these years, they won't be able to see what we have seen here. But, Su Ji said earnestly, if we start looking for it, regardless of whether we find it or not, we will be killed. If we find it, we won't be killed. Fairy Xingyu said with a smile. If we can't find it, we may not be punished. But if we don't find it, we may be guilty of a great crime. According to the legend, the cultivation mirror is the supreme cultivation method that can make one become a god. Whether you find it or not, it will be troublesome. Su Ji tried to persuade her again. He knew very well that if Fairy Xingyu found the cultivation mirror, she would definitely give it to the Celestial Master of Law. If the Celestial Master of Law wanted to keep this secret, he would have to kill Fairy Xingyu. However, if Fairy Xingyu couldn't find the cultivation mirror and any immortals knew that she had come to the Yi Qiong heavenly mansion, they would definitely suspect that Fairy Xingyu had secretly kept the cultivation mirror. The wisest thing to do was to immediately leave this place and never mention this matter again. Even if the celestial masters or celestial kings searched their souls in the future, they could still maintain their innocence. Chapter 45:16. Yes, I know. Su Ji nodded. He flew to a corpse and released his extended thought to examine it carefully. Fairy Xingyu always said that Xiaohua was stingy and greedy. Now, it was her turn. She was much slower than Xiaohua. After a while, her celestial artifact could not hold too much. When she wanted to look for the storage celestial artifacts on the corpses, she found that most of the corpses did not have any storage celestial artifacts. Fairy Xingyu did not wait any longer. She threw away some of the low-quality celestial artifacts she had obtained earlier and put in better ones. Even so, looking at the many celestial artifacts in front of her that she could not take, Fairy Xingyu was very unhappy. Perhaps I should get Su Ji to collect more. Fairy Xingyu looked up at Su Ji, who was not far away. However, after watching for a moment, she was a little surprised. This was because Su Ji was observing more than taking action. He seemed to be searching for something. Su Ji, why don't you take these things? Fairy Xingyu was a little puzzled. What are you looking for? Su Ji looked up and replied, I'm not looking for anything. I just feel that these corpses seem to have been moved by someone. The storage celestial artifacts are all gone. Moreover, the armor and weapons on these corpses are all from the Yi Qiong heavenly mansion. We don't know how to refine celestial artifacts. Even if we take all these celestial artifacts, we can't use them. Instead of that, it's better to just take some as evidence. Even if you can't use them, you can take them to trade. Fairy Xingyu urged. We have been in the lower realm for so long that our cultivation can't catch up with our peers. If we don't get some elixirs and secret techniques, how can we cultivate to the celestial master level? Xingyu. Suji said, didn't you notice? Most of the corpses in the heavenly mansion have storage celestial artifacts. We can go back and take a few more. Ah. Fairy Xingyu blushed and said in a low voice, at that time, I was shocked and wanted to find the truth about the Yi Qiong heavenly mansion. I didn't notice this. Suji nodded and looked up at one of the corpses. He raised his hand and grabbed it. A jet-black software flew out from the corpse. He looked around and said, this is not bad. It's perfect for Xiaohua to wear. TSK. Fairy Xingyu rolled her eyes at Suji and said, he has worn it. How can I take it? The star armor's quality is average. Just give it to him. Suji responded with boredom. He was about to lower his head to search again when suddenly, several thoughts that were very similar to Yen Yen's came from afar like a gust of wind. They swept across the abyss, the corpses, and landed on Suji and Fairy Xingyu. That will was incomparably cold, filled with bloodlust and brutality. When it landed on the two of them, silver light immediately erupted. Ing Yen. Suji was the first to sense it. His expression changed drastically as he exclaimed, there's actually an immortal beast here. Fairy Xingyue's face was also pale. She moved her body and said, of course there will be immortal beasts. But immortal beasts with telepathy, how can we resist them? Let's go. Io, Xiaohua. Suji hurriedly followed Fairy Xingyue and flew into the divine palace. However, after flying for a while, he realized something. Xiaohua is still outside the divine palace. This little guy. Fairy Xingyue said angrily, why didn't he wait in place? Why did he run? With that, the two of them moved like lightning in the direction of Xiaohua. The yin yen that fell on them was still like the wind, closing in on them step by step. Xiaohua was easy to find. Following the footprints he left behind earlier, Suji only flew for half a cup of tea's time before he saw the high slope filled with corpses in front of him. Xiaohua was holding a rod-shaped immortal tool that was several hundred zhang in size in his hand. He was clumsily climbing up, wanting to climb up the high slope. However, some immortal tools on the high slope were in a mess. Xiaohua accidentally fell into a huge armor. Xiaohua. Suji was both angry and amused. Before he could get close, he shouted, come back quickly. There are immortal beasts around the divine palace. Io, senior. Hearing Suji's voice, Xiaohua hurriedly turned around and waved the immortal weapon. Look, what did I find? This immortal weapon is just right for me. Idiot. Fairy Xingyue shouted, how can you touch the immortal weapon here? Why don't you put it down quickly? Xiaohua was stunned and asked curiously, Senior, didn't you say there were immortal beasts? Wouldn't it be better for me to have one for self-defense? Why do you want me to put it down? As he spoke, Suji had already flown close. Without saying a word, he raised his hand and pointed a finger. A bolt of lightning fell on the immortal artifact, causing it to shrink abruptly. Then, he waved his sleeve and was about to take Xiaohua away. However, even though the immortal artifact in Xiaohua's hand had shrunk, it was still incomparably heavy. Suji's figure was pulled down while Xiaohua's figure only flew up a few feet. Throw it away quickly. Fairy Xingyue said anxiously, the immortal beasts are coming soon. We have to hide in the divine palace quickly. If you take this immortal weapon, Suji can't fly quickly. No. Xiaohua refused without hesitation. He held the immortal weapon in his arms and said, without this immortal weapon, I am powerless. With this immortal weapon, I can resist the immortal beasts. You. Who do you think you are? Fairy Xingyue was furious. She raised her hand and a ray of starlight was about to strike down. She shouted, "Do you think this immortal beast is one of the 6 great sages of the 1,000 demons' sacred realm? How can you be a match for an immortal beast?" Xingyue. Su Ji shouted, "Go back to the divine palace first and wait at the gate. I will fly back with Xiao Hua." You. Fairy Xingyue was a little flustered and exasperated. She really didn't understand why Su Ji indulged Xiao Hua so much. In her eyes, Xiao Hua was just a mortal. Even if he had an immortal weapon, he couldn't be a match for an immortal beast. Fairy Xingyue stomped her feet and turned around to fly away. However, she stopped again after flying 100 feet. She opened her mouth and the previous star shuttle flew out again. At this time, the star shuttle landed in the air. It was different from before. Layers of immortal spirit chi swarmed into it and the entire star shuttle emitted a dreamy glow. In the air thousands of feet around the star shuttle, besides the immortal spirit chi, there was also a kind of frost-like cold air. Xiao Hua thought that Fairy Xingyue was controlling the star shuttle to fly him and Su Ji. Unexpectedly, Fairy Xingyue raised her hand and pointed at the star shuttle. The star shuttle slowly rotated and hundreds of starlight rays emerged from the front of the star shuttle, piercing straight into the air. Fairy Xingyue turned her head and shouted, "Quick, I hope we can rush back to the divine palace before the immortal beast flies over. Go." Su Ji no longer waved his sleeve. Instead, he waved his hand. A bolt of lightning descended and sealed the space around Xiao Hua. Then, with a loud roar, he grabbed the immortal artifact along with Xiao Hua. His figure descended and flew towards the gate of the heavenly sanctum. Flying with Xiao Hua and the immortal weapon was obviously a little too much for Su Ji. Big drops of sweat rolled down Su Ji's forehead and the silver light under the armor rushed out several times. Xiao Hua was also in a dilemma. He wanted to throw the immortal weapon away several times, but when he saw the solemn faces of Su Ji and Fairy Xingyue, he knew that the immortal beast that hadn't appeared yet must be very powerful. If he didn't have this immortal weapon, he would not only be food for the immortal beast, but also a burden to the two of them. Although Su Ji was a little tired now, it was better than losing his life later. Aoo! Suddenly, a strange beast roar sounded. When Xiao Hua heard it, he couldn't help but tremble. Golden flowers appeared in front of his eyes and sparks flew in all directions from his Naiwan palace. Fairy Xingyue and Su Ji's bodies glowed with silver light at the same time, protecting them. Xiao Hua was below Su Ji. He could clearly see that when the silver light appeared, traces of blood seeped out of Su Ji's body. Nimbus Immortal Beast! Nimbus Immortal Beast! Fairy Xingyue panicked. How could there be a Nimbus Immortal Beast here? Although Su Ji also showed a rare trace of panic on his face, he replied calmly, "The space fragments here are different from the ones we encountered before. It's normal for immortal beasts to appear that are beyond imagination. The problem is..." Fairy Xingyue urged the star shuttle and shouted, "If we were at our peak strength, we might be able to defeat this Nimbus Immortal Beast. But now, how can we resist this Nimbus Immortal Beast?" Divine Palace. Su Ji didn't mention the name of the Yi Qiong Heavenly Palace. He only said that it was the Divine Palace path. We didn't see the Nimbus Immortal Beast around the Divine Palace before. This immortal beast must be afraid of the Divine Palace's restrictions. We can hide in the Divine Palace. That's the only way. Su Ji mentioned the Divine Palace again, as if to encourage Fairy Xingyue. Fairy Xingyue gritted her teeth and flew toward the gate of the Divine Palace. Xiao Hua also frowned and asked in a low voice, "Senior, what kind of immortal beast is this Nimbus Immortal Beast? Why is it so powerful?" "It's not appropriate to mention it now." Su Ji said lightly, "When you see it, you'll naturally know. In fact, it doesn't have to be this Nimbus Immortal Beast. In other places outside the meteor belt, those immortal beasts are not as cruel and fierce as the Nimbus immortal beast. Ordinary cultivators are definitely no match for it. After saying that, Su Ji ignored Xiao Hua and focused on flying toward the gate of the palace. Awu. Seeing the gate of the divine palace appear in front of her, Fairy Xingyue's face was filled with joy. Suddenly, she heard a roar coming from high up in the sky. Xiao Hua looked up and saw three strange immortal beasts that were several hundred zhang in size flying over like shooting stars. Before they could even get close, Xiao Hua felt a chill in the surroundings, and a bloody smell emerged out of nowhere. Moreover, within the space, there were some faint spots that appeared. These spots were like ferocious eyes that stared at the three of them. Looking at the place where the clouds were surging, the so-called Nimbus immortal beast's figure was revealed. This immortal beast looked like a huge stork. There was a scarlet bulge on its head, and this bulge was covered with marks of different sizes. Around these marks, there was a boundless amount of immortal spiritual energy clustered around them. Chapter 45:17. The head of the flying dagger immortal beast was flat and slightly long, like several sickles tied together. Its long, flying sword-like beak was the blade of the sickle. The neck of the flying dagger immortal beast was extremely long, with several thick tendons entwined together. Below the neck was the body of the beast, which was covered with triangular scales. The edges of the scales were either covered with fiery red fine fur or flat feathers. Strings of sparks splashed out from within from time to time. Two pairs of bone wings stretched out from the waist of the flying dagger immortal beast. There were very few feathers on the bone wings, only some sharp protrusions. Every protrusion had a corresponding mark. The tail of the flying dagger immortal beast was also extremely long. This tail was segmented, and as it swung, layers of mysterious crimson runes emerged from the roots and surged to the tip of the tail. The tip of the tail had some fiery red markings. The markings seemed to be on the tip of the tail, but also seemed to be in the void. It gave off an unreal feeling. As for the abdomen of the flying dagger immortal beast, the three sharp claws that reached into the void occasionally slashed, creating cracks in the void. Damn it! Although he had not fought with the flying dagger immortal beast yet, Xiao Hua had already sensed its power. We should let the golden-winged great rock take a look at this place. If nothing goes wrong, even the first great saint of the demon clan may not be a match for this immortal beast. Senior. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. This is the rhythm of a dead man. I remember that Zhu Qing did not say that the Star Moon Palace was so terrifying back in the Bronze Pillar country. How would Zhu Qing know the details of the Star Moon Palace? Su Ji looked into the distance, still wanting to rush into the Yi Qiong Heavenly Palace before the flying dagger immortal beast arrived. He only said casually, if you want to find opportunities in the Star Moon Palace, how can you not pay a price? Oh, no. As he spoke, the two flying dagger immortal beasts in front of him suddenly accelerated and disappeared in a flash. At the same time, fiery red bubbles began to appear in the void in front of Xiao Hua and the others, like boiling water. Damn it! Fairy Xingyu cursed angrily. She rubbed her hands together in a hurry. Clusters of star-like mist mixed with brilliance fell into the void. Then, the rotating star shuttle suddenly exploded. Hong hong hong. Tens of thousands of star fragments rushed out of the star shuttle and fell towards the void, causing the surrounding space to collapse. At the same time, in front of the star fragment, layers of red flames surged out and enveloped an area of 100 miles. When the star shatter met the flames, it exploded everywhere. Fortunately, Fairy Xingyu was the first to react. The star shatter formed a kind of defense, blocking all the flames from reaching the crowd. However, in just a few breaths, a fierce aura rushed out from the flames in the distance. The space within hundreds of feet was extremely distorted. Then, the space cracked inch by inch like silk. Boom! With a loud bang, 3 sharp sword-like red claws stretched out, passing through the space and grabbing at Fairy Xingyue. Whoosh! Fairy Xingyue had been accumulating her strength for a long time. When she saw the sharp claws, she raised her hand without hesitation. Silver light rushed out from her body. Her saber, like a moon, cut across the sky and slashed at the 3 sharp claws. Clang! A golden sound suddenly rang out. Flames appeared on the flying dagger immortal beast's sharp claws. Layers of runes were split in half, and blood was faintly visible. Suddenly, with a roar, the flying dagger immortal beast's sharp mouth appeared in the space in front of Fairy Xinyue's chest. This sharp mouth broke through Fairy Xinyue's star moon saber at lightning speed and landed on Fairy Xinyue's heart. Be careful. Su Ji was shocked. Just as he was about to move his body, a fierce aura descended from the sky above his head, causing Su Ji's body to fall slightly. Go to the door first. Su Ji did not forget Xiao Hua, who was under him. With a wave of his arm, Xiao Hua flew out like a meteor. Su Ji had just thrown Xiao Hua out when 3 red claws formed a triangle and covered Su Ji in the sky. Even if Su Ji wanted to help Fairy Xinyue, he could not. However, at this moment, Fairy Xinyue waved her other hand again. Her saber was like a star, drawing a star curtain in front of the beast's mouth. Boom! The beast's mouth hit the star curtain and instantly broke it. Under this huge force, Fairy Xinyue's entire body flew out like a fallen leaf. Damn it! Su Ji was furious. The silver light around him shone brightly. Then, with a wave of his hands, layers of thunderbolts flew out like a tide and rushed high into the sky. The thunderbolts were like a tide, but the flying dagger immortal beast's sharp claws were like reef rocks. When they fell, they shattered the thunderbolts. The moment the thunderbolts blocked the flying dagger immortal beast, a dazzling thunderbolt flashed between Su Ji's eyebrows. Waves of thunderbolts flashed like spikes from within. When the ripples fell into the sky, the entire sky collapsed. An aura that was close to the will of heaven and earth overflowed from the collapse. As Su Ji grabbed between his eyebrows, a light as bright as a star appeared in his hand. The light pierced through all the darkness, and the vast aura instantly filled the entire space fragment. This is a punishment celestial weapon. Even though Xiao Hua had already slowed down in midair and was about to descend, he could still easily identify the origin of the immortal artifact in Su Ji's hand when the powerful aura of justice, fairness, and justice rushed past him. He could not help but groan and look up at Su Ji. In the light and shadow, a punishment celestial weapon that looked like a spear appeared. The spear looked like it was only 8 feet long, but the light and shadow vaguely seemed to be submerged in the void. Endless thunderbolts appeared in the spear, and thousands of thunderbolts that revealed supreme majesty overflowed on the surface of the spear. Su Ji held the spear, and without any hesitation, he stabbed it toward the top of his head. Where the spear landed, the entire space was pierced, and the space within 100 miles was also transparent. In this transparent space, another flying dagger immortal beast could be seen, and a terrifying expression appeared on its ferocious face. However, the punishment celestial weapon only pierced a few feet. Ka ka ka. A burst of ear-piercing cracking sounds came from Su Ji's body. The armor on Su Ji's body broke, and pieces of flesh burst out from the armor. Even the space between Su Ji's eyebrows had a bloodstain that looked like a thunderbolt. In the bloodstain, white bones could be seen. Humph. Su Ji coldly snorted, and his hand that was controlling the punishment celestial weapon did not stop. He did not care about the collapse of his body at all. He wanted to kill the flying dagger immortal beast before he was powerless. Unfortunately, wishes were always beautiful, and the things in the world would never change because of true feelings. The punishment celestial weapon only pierced another 10 feet before the thunderbolts around it were gradually extinguished. The soaring aura was also contained within the spear. What was special was that the spear rapidly shrank until it was less than a few inches long, and it automatically fell between Su Ji's eyebrows. Aogg. The flying dagger immortal beast that almost died in the punishment celestial weapon suddenly let out a roar. It didn't escape, but it charged out from the void toward Su Ji. Su Ji hurriedly waved his hand and a spear-like celestial weapon appeared in his hand. Woo! He stabbed at the flying dagger immortal beast. Su Ji rarely showed his skills, but this spear was amazing. Although the celestial weapon didn't have much celestial spiritual energy, it still dodged the flying dagger immortal beast's attack and stabbed into the flying dagger immortal beast's body from a strange angle. Boom! The flying dagger immortal beast roared angrily. Thousands of flames appeared on its scales and instantly wrapped around the celestial weapon. Moreover, the flying dagger immortal beast's huge tail swept up a gust of wind and hit Su Ji's back. Facing the flying dagger immortal beast's close-range attack, the silver light around Su Ji's body surged. Waves of lightning also flashed under the flying dagger immortal beast's tail. Pa pa pa. In the crisp sound, several layers of lightning were destroyed. Su Ji's body was also swept by the flying dagger immortal beast's tough tail and fell like a stone. Damn it! Seeing the two celestials who had just met the two flying dagger immortal beasts and were at a disadvantage in the first exchange, Xiaohua couldn't help but curse in a low voice. He understood that the two celestials couldn't gain any advantage in close-range combat with the flying dagger immortal beasts. However, the main reason was that the two of them were in their physical bodies and not celestial spiritual bodies. They couldn't use celestial weapons and didn't even dare to use too much celestial spiritual energy. If too much celestial spiritual energy entered their bodies, not to mention fighting with the flying dagger immortal beast, even their own physical bodies would collapse first. What should we do? Xiaohua naturally wouldn't stand by and watch, even if his previous plan was exposed. He only pondered for a moment, and the space between his eyebrows also flashed with a dark green light. His figure also stopped and prepared to return to help. But at this moment, a sharp flying sword pierced through the void and directly fell on the top of Xiaohua's head. This sharp and heavy was extremely heavy. Xiaohua felt as if a huge mountain was falling from the sky. How could Xiaohua dare to be negligent? Raising his head, he saw several three corpses in thunder. He saw that in the surrounding void, one after another, green seal text rushed out and set up a lightning array within a few li. Rumble. Just as Xiaohua's lightning and thunder technique was used, the third flying dagger immortal beast had already pounced. This flying dagger immortal beast was clearly smaller than the previous two, but the power that rushed out was not something Xiaohua could withstand. The flying dagger immortal beast's 3 legs fell and the beast's mouth fell, destroying the exploding 3 corpses in thunder. Even the other green seal text scattered in the space were destroyed by the flying dagger immortal beast's tail. Damn it! How is this possible? Xiaohua finally experienced the power of the flying dagger immortal beast. He cursed loudly, even I am not a match for this flying dagger immortal beast. In the entire 3 continents, who can pass through this spatial fragment? Whoever comes will die. Although he cursed like this, Xiaohua's body still flashed with golden light, wanting to activate his transcendence golden body. However, as the golden light flashed, countless celestial spiritual energy madly rushed in. Xiaohua's physical body uncontrollably swelled up, while the other part produced chaotic fluctuations. The golden light flashed and disappeared. Chapter 45:18. Humph. Xiaohua was still unwilling to give up. More soul strands appeared between his eyebrows as he unleashed the bloodline power of God Shibai. Woo! The flying crane immortal beast seemed to have sensed Xiaohua's abnormality and swung its huge tail at him. Amidst the whistling of the wind, the soul strands were destroyed one after another. The power of the bloodline backlash was generated from Xiaohua's body, alas. Xiao Hua sighed. He now understood that although he could use his soul cultivation in this space, his soul cultivation strength was far inferior to that of the flying crane immortal beast. Even if he used these soul cultivation divine abilities, he would only attract the suspicion of Fairy Xingyu and Su Ji. He would not be able to change the situation of the battle. Since the power of the soul can't do anything, then I'll use the other most primitive power in this world. Xiao Hua thought as he waved the immortal weapon in his hand. Woo! It smashed towards the flying crane immortal beast. Pang! With a loud bang, the flying crane immortal beast's huge tail hit Xiao Hua's immortal weapon. Xiao Hua's body was flipped over and landed far away. However, the flying crane immortal beast's body also shook violently. Its previously unstoppable momentum was suppressed by this strike. Whoosh! Just as Xiao Hua was sent flying by the flying crane immortal beast, Fairy Xingyu and Su Ji, who were also sent flying by the flying crane immortal beast, moved as well. Before their bodies landed, they immediately shot out like flying arrows and flew towards Xiao Hua's direction. Whoosh! The phalanx immortal beast landed in the sky. It no longer needed to flap its wings, but with a flap of its 3 legs, it chased after the 2 cultivators like a shooting star. Its 2 beak-like beaks even tore through the sky and bit down on the 2 cultivators. The flying crane immortal beast's beak was so powerful that with one bite, it devoured the space within 100 feet. Naturally, Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu's bodies were also devoured. Even before their bodies arrived, the silver light on the surface of their bodies had already entered the beast's mouth. Damn it! Fairy Xingyu panicked. She raised her hand and threw out an unknown immortal artifact. Then, she flicked her finger. Boom! The immortal artifact exploded in the collapsed space behind her. Although it was not refined by Fairy Xingyu and the power of the explosion was much weaker, the force of the explosion still shattered the collapsed space. However, right at this moment, the spearhawk closed its mouth and the explosion and void disappeared. When it opened its mouth again, everything was gone. This is the power of the flying crane immortal beast. Fairy Xingyu was also shocked. She thought to herself, I'm afraid that it's really as recorded in the ancient books of the Palace of Justice. Only the energy-gathering celestial has the power to win. However, while Fairy Xingyu was still in shock, she used the previous explosion and the shockwave to fly far away. What Fairy Xingyu could think of and do, Su Ji could do as well. Su Ji did not wait to land. With a wave of his hand, several thunderbolts roared and rushed out. He also moved close to the ground. At this time, Su Ji did not care about the collapse of his body. Silver light danced on the surface of his body like a flickering shadow. In the blink of an eye, he was more than 1,000 feet away. Woo! The flying crane immortal beast that attacked Su Ji swept its tail. The entire space was filled with the explosive sound of immortal spirit chi. The space was split open by the flying crane immortal beast. Su Ji didn't dare to fight anymore. He raised his hands and 2 lightning swords shot out. Although they only managed to shatter a few of the scales on the tail, Su Ji had already reversed the force from the tail. Using the ingenious method of borrowing force to counteract force, he accelerated once again. Woo! Seeing that Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu had dodged the 2 attacks and took the opportunity to escape, the 2 flying crane immortal beasts were furious. They spread their wings and rushed into the air. In a flash, they flew above the 2 people. Then, the top of the 2 flying crane immortal beasts' heads lit up. The red bulge suddenly shone brightly. Dozens of fist-sized flames flew out from this light and covered Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu. When these dozens of flames fell into the air, immortal spirit chi immediately poured in. The flames suddenly turned into pillars of fire and fell with a loud bang, trying to imprison Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu. Damn it! It's really like a tiger being bullied by a dog. Fairy Xingyu was really angry. Even if the flying crane immortal beasts were powerful, when had she ever been bullied to this extent by immortal beasts? She could not help but curse. The silver light around her was activated like a waterfall. The star blade and the moon blade in her hands swung out respectively. The saber light was like lightning, immediately splitting several pillars of fire. Even the star shuttle that was flying with Fairy Xingyu pierced into one of the pillars of fire and destroyed it. However, just as these pillars of fire were extinguished, a slightly cold flame seeped into Fairy Xingyue's silver light and quickly entered her body. Oh no! Fairy Xingyue was really anxious when she saw the flame invading her body. She did not care about destroying the pillars of fire anymore. She pointed her thumb at the top of her head. Poof! The brilliance of the stars and moon poured down like a spring, protecting her body. The brilliance rushed toward the flame, trying to extinguish it. Just as Fairy Xingyue was trying to save herself, the flying crane immortal beast's thick tail swept down from the void again, aiming for Fairy Xingyue's chest. Now that Fairy Xingyue was in danger, how could Su Ji, who only had 40% of his cultivation in the immortal world, escape? The sparks that flowed out of the flying crane immortal beast's head turned into pillars of fire that trapped Su Ji. Su Ji waved the lightning in his hand and destroyed several pillars of fire in front of him. Suddenly, he realized that the flame was like flowing water, following the lightning in his hand and invading his body. Su Ji did not hesitate at all. With one hand like a knife, he cut off his other hand from his body. At the same time, he opened his mouth and a thunder talisman surrounded by lightning was about to spit out. However, the flying crane immortal beast's 3 legs fell from 3 directions. Su Ji did not know how many of them his thunder talisman could block. At this critical moment, the cries of the flying kite immortal beasts rang out once more. 2 even larger flying kite immortal beasts descended from the sky above the blazing sky palace. Damn it! Su Ji and Fairy Xingyue were shrouded in the shadows of the flying crane immortal beasts. It was as if the shadow of death had fallen. Both of them were disheartened. However, just as the 2 of them looked at each other with despair in their eyes, a strange sound rang out again. Ga, Su Ji and Fairy Xingyue were stunned. When they looked above them again, they were ecstatic. This was because the next 2 flying crane immortal beasts' legs did not land on Su Ji and Fairy Xingyue, but on the backs of the first 2 flying crane immortal beasts. The 2 flying crane immortal beasts, who were determined to kill Su Ji and Fairy Xingyue, did not dare to kill them. They spread their wings and swung their tails high into the sky, crushing the space within a few hundred feet to meet the 6 sharp claws. The sharp claws collided with the tails. Amidst the roar, the 2 smaller flying crane immortal beasts tumbled violently in the air. The larger flying crane immortal beast showed no mercy. Its sharp claws danced and grabbed the 2 smaller flying crane immortal beasts' backs, instantly tearing off some of their scales. The 2 smaller flying crane immortal beasts also swung their claws while tumbling, waiting for an opportunity to counterattack. Damn it, this is what it means to meet a worthy opponent. You guys have a good fight. Of course, Su Ji and Fairy Xingyue did not think that the 2 flying crane immortal beasts had come to save them. However, at this moment, their eyes were filled with ecstasy. They looked at each other and muttered to themselves. Then, they sneaked past the pillars of fire that had not yet been extinguished and flew toward Xiaohua. Ow wow! The 2 smaller flying crane immortal beasts were no match for the flying crane immortal beast. After a few rounds, they were already drenched in blood. One of them could not help but cry out in a low voice. While Xiaohua was sent flying by the flying crane immortal beast, the flying crane immortal beast was also blocked in midair. The flying crane immortal beast was stunned at first, then its bestial nature erupted. Its wings flapped crazily, and 3 sharp claws slammed down like rain, wanting to slap Xiaohua, this little thing, to death. Seeing that the flying crane immortal beast did not activate its flames and only used its sharp claws, Xiaohua was overjoyed. He waved his immortal weapon with both hands and used the ethereal steps. He used the sky-piercing staff technique to fight the flying crane immortal beast. Although Xiao Hua was powerful now and was not restricted by the 9 levels of essence force of the 3 continents in this space fragment, he could not be compared to the essence-gathering immortal that Fairy Xingyue had imagined. After fighting with the flying crane immortal beast's sharp claws for a while, he already felt weak and numb. The flying crane immortal beast took advantage of the chaos and swung its claws at Xiao Hua's body. Xiao Hua's body, which was incomparably tough in the Thousand Demons' sacred realm, was as weak as mud under the flying crane immortal beast's claws. Several bloody marks instantly appeared. While Xiao Hua was greatly shocked, his figure swayed, and he just dodged the sharp claws when the flying crane immortal beast roared and opened its mouth. The space above Xiao Hua's head was swallowed up, and an extremely powerful suction force enveloped Xiao Hua along with the ground. Seeing that the ground nearby was about to be torn apart, some corpses on the ground were being sucked in, and even some immortal weapons were being swallowed by the flying crane immortal beast. Xiao Hua was quick-witted. He waved the immortal weapon in his hand and picked up the armor, immortal weapons, and other items within a radius of several hundred feet. He swept them into the flying crane immortal beast's mouth and used the momentum to escape into the distance. Boom boom. The flying crane immortal beast's suction force was very powerful. The armor and other items that fell into the beast's mouth all exploded. However, the explosions were like fireworks, and even though Xiao Hua tried his best to escape, he still couldn't escape the range of the flying crane immortal beast's suction force. Bang! 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 Xiao Hua's face went pale, and in his panic, he circulated his soul technique once more, causing string after string of 3 corpsine lightning to appear behind him. Unfortunately, even an immortal artifact was unable to cause any waves in the mouth of the skyhawk, so what effect could these top-grade Dharma techniques of the cultivation world have? The 3 corpsine lightning only stopped the flying crane immortal beast for a moment before the beast's mouth came down again. What made Xiao Hua most sullen was that one of the flying crane immortal beast's claws had reached his back at some point. Rip! Not only did it tear apart Xiao Hua's star armor and Taoist robe, it also knocked Xiao Hua to the ground. His body rolled on the ground, and the Grand Ascension stage human race's face was completely swept away. Chapter 45-19. At this point, Xiao Hua could no longer consider hiding anything. His mind was about to enter the space, ready to summon Taoist Witch, Celestial Being, and the others to fight. It was also at this moment, rumble. Huge thunderbolts surged over like a flood. Swish swish swish. After the thunderbolts, the light pillars of stars and moons also crazily bombarded. The pillars of lightning, starlight, and moonlight all entered the mouth of the flying crane immortal beast, temporarily dispersing the enormous devouring power. Roar! The flying phalanx immortal beast was furious. It raised its head and let out a long howl. Its angry gaze shifted away from Xiao Hua's body, which was rolling like a pellet, and looked behind it. In the sky, Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu had quietly arrived. They each used their immortal spiritual power to save Xiao Hua. The flying crane immortal beast spread its wings, and the entire space was filled with crimson flames. The bulge on its forehead was also flashing with brilliance. Fairy Xingyu secretly complained, while Su Ji roared, "Xingyu, you and I split up. I will lead the flying crane immortal beast to another place. You take Xiao Hua and rush into the heavens palace." Fairy Xingyu gritted her teeth and said, "All right, be careful." Just as Su Ji was about to fly up, another anxious roar came from behind Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu. The flying crane immortal beast that was pouncing towards Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu was startled and looked up into the distance. Su Ji saw this and hurriedly descended, quietly hiding beside a corpse. Fairy Xingyu also slowly descended. Sure enough, before Fairy Xingyu could hide herself, the flying crane immortal beast roared and flapped its wings, flying towards the battle in the distance. "Let's go." Su Ji saw that the flying crane immortal beast had just flown away, and his figure immediately moved, rushing towards Xiaohua like a wisp of smoke. At this moment, Xiaohua was in an extremely sorry state. The bronze-colored skin on his back was exposed. Streaks of blood seemed to be facing outwards. Although there was no blood seeping out, the wounds were slowly wriggling and couldn't heal very quickly. Looking at Xiaohua's body, he was stained with some mud. Although he was holding an immortal artifact in his hand, his arm was still slightly trembling. Clearly, he had used too much strength. Su Ji flew over his head, and without even looking at him, he grabbed him with his big hand. His figure fell rapidly again, and his flying speed also decreased. "Damn it, what do I need that piece of junk for?" Fairy Xingyu, who had originally been following Su Ji, overtook him all of a sudden. She looked at the immortal weapon Xiaohua was talking about and said in a low voice, "Even if you have it, you are no match for the winged crane immortal beast." "Big sister." Xiaohua laughed bitterly and said, "With this, I might not be able to defeat the flying crane immortal beast, but I can at least preserve my life. If you don't have it, you can only collect my corpse. Quick." Su Ji had been paying attention to what was behind him. At this moment, he urged loudly, "Xingyue, don't say any more. The flying crane immortal beast has already noticed that we have left." Hearing this, Fairy Xingyu naturally turned her head back. Sure enough, with the addition of the last Nimbus immortal beast, the situation of the battle immediately became complicated. In just a moment, the two larger Nimbus immortal beasts were also injured by the three Nimbus immortal beasts. They had no choice but to slow down their attacks. Now that the battle had slowed down, the Phalanx immortal beasts thought of their prey and looked at Su Ji and the others. "I'll help you." Fairy Xingyu did not dare to be negligent. She raised her hand and waved it, and a huge hand of stars and moon fell. Together with Su Ji, she grabbed Xiaohua and rushed to the gate of the Heaven's Mansion with Xiaohua. "Ow wow." Seeing that their prey was escaping, the two larger Nimbus immortal beasts spread their wings and pounced at Su Ji and the others with a roar. Boom! Unfortunately, before they could fly more than 300 meters, the three smaller Nimbus immortal beasts were even faster. They fell from the top of the two Nimbus immortal beasts' heads and smashed their tails mercilessly on the necks of the two Nimbus immortal beasts. The two Nimbus immortal beasts were furious. They curled their tails and stretched out their sharp claws again. Caw caw caw. With an ear-piercing sound, another Nimbus immortal beast's scales were torn and fell. In an instant, the five Nimbus immortal beasts were fighting again. Phew! Xiaohua was taken to the gate of the Heaven's Mansion by the two immortals. When he turned around and saw the five Nimbus immortal beasts fighting, he could not help but let out a long sigh of relief. He could not help but cry out, "Damn it, this kind of space fragment. No cultivator on the three continents can walk out alive, right?" "Of course." Fairy Xingyu sneered. "Even we have to suffer under the sharp claws of the Nimbus immortal beasts. How can others leave alive?" Su Ji also said with lingering fear, "I guess, this is also the reason why the Star Moon Palace disappeared from the three continents." Fairy Xingyu nodded. "I was also surprised earlier. Since the three continents have tokens to enter and exit the Star Moon Palace, there is no reason why there is no news about the Star Moon Palace. I guess the cultivators who entered the Star Moon Palace in the past were unlucky enough to encounter these Nimbus immortal beasts. Or maybe there are other Nimbus immortal beasts that are even more powerful. They were all wiped out here, leaving no clues behind. Oh, no. Quick." She had only said a few words when the battle between the five Nimbus immortal beasts came to an end. Another Nimbus immortal beast rushed out of the battle and pounced on Su Ji and the others. At this time, Su Ji and the others were only a few hundred meters away from the Yi Qiong Heavenly Mansion. "Let's fight." Su Ji roared and the silver light around him shone brightly. Fairy Xingyu was anxious and shouted, "Su Ji, don't." Before she could finish speaking, lightning flashed under Su Ji's feet and pieces of flesh and blood dripped down. His flying speed increased greatly as he carried Xiaohua. Seeing that Su Ji's fight was to speed up, Fairy Xingyu finally heaved a sigh of relief. She also hurriedly urged the remaining immortal qi to speed up. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Even Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu were not as fast as the Nimbus immortal beasts, let alone Xiaohua, who was carrying a heavy object. The three of them had only flown a few hundred meters. When they were halfway there, the Nimbus immortal beasts had already caught up. This time, the two groups of Nimbus immortal beasts had a tacit understanding. Two of the larger Nimbus immortal beasts rushed towards Su Ji, while the three Nimbus immortal beasts that came first pounced on Fairy Xingyu. Xiaohua was already regarded as an easy prey. Seeing that the five Nimbus immortal beasts were waving their sharp claws at Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu's heads, Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly shouted, "Leave me behind, run away from the palace gate, and run in the opposite direction." Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu were stunned and immediately understood. They looked at each other and urged their immortal qi on their arms at the same time. They threw Xiaohua toward the palace gate, turned around, and rushed into the distance. Seeing that the three of them had separated, the five Nimbus immortal beasts were obviously stunned. However, they did not have much time to think about it. Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu sped up. Just as one of the Nimbus immortal beasts was about to pounce on Xiaohua, the other two Nimbus immortal beasts roared and stopped the Nimbus immortal beasts from splitting up. As a result, the five Nimbus immortal beasts turned their wings and flew toward Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu. Xiaohua's figure landed on the ground without a trace of stagnation. He flew toward the gate of the heaven's abode like flowing water. It was only a distance of a few hundred meters. In the past, he could cover it with just a few steps. Now, it was a matter of life and death. Boom! Xiaohua had just flown halfway when he heard a roar behind him. Xiaohua panicked. Damn it, aren't these Nimbus immortal beasts too powerful? Sure enough, when he looked back, Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu were already tumbling in the air and flying toward the palace gate. At this time, Xiaohua himself had not reached the palace gate. Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu heard Xiaohua's words and immediately came to their senses. They threw Xiaohua aside and flew in the opposite direction of the palace gate. After flying for a while, the five Nimbus immortal beasts had already flown above their heads and their sharp claws slammed down. At this time, Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu had a tacit understanding and swapped their positions. The exchange between the two of them was easy, but the attack of the five Nimbus immortal beasts was not easy to distinguish. Caw caw caw. The wings of the two groups of Nimbus immortal beasts collided almost at the same time. In an instant, the five Nimbus immortal beasts pounced on each other again. Of course, this time, the Nimbus immortal beasts had learned their lesson. After swapping positions, they split up again and swung their tails at Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu. Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu had quietly retreated a little when the Nimbus immortal beasts were fighting. When they saw the huge tails sweeping toward them, they were overjoyed and activated their immortal artifacts to block them. Boom boom. Two loud sounds rang out in succession. Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu were sent flying by the huge tails. Wasn't the direction of the heaven's abode palace gate? Damn it! Although the two immortals seemed to be in a sorry state, they were about to crash into the heaven's abode like meteors. Xiaohua was still thousands of feet away from the heaven's abode palace. Then, he rolled his eyes and raised his hand to pick up the immortal artifact. He pushed against the ground and exerted force in his hand. Woo! His whole body flew straight for more than 100 feet and landed on the ground. Then, Xiaohua stumbled and ran for a few more feet. Once again, he pushed against the ground and his body flew again. After a few more times, and with Xiao Hua's secret soul cultivation flying technique, he managed to chase Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu back. Rise! Seeing Xiao Hua push himself up again, Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu understood. They stretched out their hands at the same time and grabbed Xiao Hua's body with their immortal qi. Then, the three of them rushed through the gate of the Heaven's Abode Palace. At this time, the sharp claws of the flying crane immortal beast had already fallen. With a swoosh, Xiao Hua's back was torn apart again. Woo! The three of them fell into the gate of the Heaven's Abode Palace. Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu let go of Xiao Hua at the same time. Xiao Hua's body drew an arc in the air and landed on the ground of the main hall. Amidst the whistling of the wind, there was a series of clattering sounds. Xiao Hua's slightly clumsy body smashed the corpses on the ground into a mess. Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu also staggered to the ground. Not only were their faces abnormally pale, but there were also some drops of sweat dripping from their foreheads and necks. Fairy Xingyu stood on the ground and wiped her forehead with her hand. Looking at the sweat, she smiled bitterly and said, "Is this sweat? I can't remember the last time I sweated." Chapter 45-20. Su Ji ignored Fairy Xingyu. He released his thought extending and scanned the ground. When his thought extending landed on a corpse, he hurried over and picked up a box-like fairy weapon from the corpse. As his thought extending passed, he took out a thumb-sized elixir. However, he just looked at it, then threw it on the ground and said, "Although these elixirs are useful, we can't take them." "What a pity. Su Ji, take this first." Fairy Xingyu smiled, took out a jade bottle, and threw it to Su Ji. Su Ji was slightly stunned. He took the jade bottle with a wry smile, took out a blue elixir, and swallowed it. Then, he sat cross-legged on the ground and adjusted his breathing. Fairy Xingyu looked at Xiao Hua, took out another jade bottle and swallowed it. Then, she looked at Xiao Hua and asked, "Xiao Hua, these elixirs I refined are not suitable for you. Your injuries seem to be superficial. As long as you get out of this space fragment, you should be able to heal yourself, right?" "Senior, you're right." Xiao Hua nodded. "I don't need to waste elixirs. This junior will stand guard for the seniors." "No need. It's safe in the Heaven Mansion now." Fairy Xingyu said with a smile, "Those Nimbus immortal beasts don't dare to enter. You should rest for a while. We'll discuss." Unfortunately, before Fairy Xingyu could finish speaking, another roar of the Nimbus immortal beasts came from outside the door. Then, a gust of wind and flames rushed in from outside the door. The smaller Nimbus immortal beast was the first to rush in. "How is that possible?" Startled, Fairy Xingyu cried out, "If these flying jade immortal beasts could rush into the Heaven Mansion, the Heaven Mansion would have been in a mess. Now, there are no traces of the Nimbus immortal beasts coming in and out of the Heaven Mansion. They obviously don't dare to come in. Maybe they couldn't before." Su Ji suddenly opened his eyes, glanced at the Nimbus immortal beasts rushing in, and said, "They didn't even dare to get close to the Heaven Mansion. Now, I'm afraid they don't have any scruples. The Heaven Mansion is going to suffer." Hiss. Although Su Ji said Yiqiong Heavenly Prefecture, Fairy Xingyu knew what he meant. When the three of them arrived at the Yiqiong Heavenly Prefecture, the entire Heavenly Prefecture did not show any signs of being destroyed by the flying crane immortal beast. Clearly, the aura of the corpses of the two celestial venerables had forced them to stay away. Now that they had collected the corpses of the two celestial venerables, the aura of the two celestial venerables had disappeared. Naturally, the phalanx immortal beasts could approach the immortal mansion without fear. Although there was a restriction around the immortal mansion, it was limited to the surroundings. They didn't know how to activate the restriction in front of the door, so the phalanx immortal beasts could enter the immortal mansion. Motherfucker. Even this so-called heavenly abode can't stop the flying kite immortal beast. Are we all going to die here? This shard of the celestial realm is really killing me. Xiao Hua was even more shocked, and he cursed furiously in his heart. But he didn't dare dally, and he waved his immortal artifact to greet them while he said, "Senior, quickly heal your injuries. I'll obstruct them for a while. Get out of the way." How could Su Ji still care about healing? He hurriedly got up and shouted, "Xiao Hua, you're no match for them." As he spoke, Su Ji raised his hand and grabbed. A shadow condensed from lightning had already passed through his hand and landed on the flying kite immortal beast. Whoosh! How could the flying kite immortal beast be afraid of this shadow? It opened its mouth and spat out a crimson pillar of fire, which collided with the palm shadow. With a boom, the pillar of fire was annihilated, and the shadow also disappeared. That powerful airflow almost flipped Xiao Hua over. Ow wow! At this time, behind the flying kite immortal beast, another flying kite immortal beast was obviously bigger. It seemed to be another group. Xingyue. Su Ji raised his head and looked around, then shouted, "Let's split up and rush into the heavenly abode to see if there's a restriction to avoid the flying kite immortal beast." Okay. Fairy Xingyue hesitated for a moment, then her figure flashed and flew in another direction. "Senior." Seeing that Su Ji was coming to save him, Xiao Hua hurriedly shouted, "Although I don't have any magic power, I know the art of fighting. The main hall of the heavenly abode is not like the outside. There are pillars, corridors, and other obstacles. Although the flying kite immortal beast is powerful, it may not be able to do anything to me. Senior, you'd better hurry to the depths of the heavenly abode to find a way to kill the flying kite immortal beast. Now, there are only 5 flying kite immortal beasts. We can still deal with them. If a few more come, we'll really die without a burial place." As he spoke, Xiao Hua waved his celestial artifact again, and his figure jumped into the distance. His figure was quite agile, and he was hiding behind a huge pillar. Ow wow! At this time, the flying kite immortal beast had already stretched out its sharp claws to grab Su Ji. The other flying kite immortal beast flapped its wings and flew toward Fairy Xingyue. Okay. Su Ji thought for a moment, then quickly retreated and shouted, "Be careful. I remember that there is a smaller hall in the depths of the heavenly abode. Go in and hide first." Crack. Just as Su Ji finished speaking, the flying kite immortal beast's sharp claws had already clawed down. As Su Ji dodged, the floor of the main hall was already cracked by the flying kite immortal beast's claws. Su Ji looked at the entrance of the hall again, and then he flicked his finger, causing a ball of lightning to shoot out. Rumble. A huge tremor resounded, and it drew the attention of the flying crane immortal beast that was charging over from Xiao Hua, and then it urged its figure to charge towards the other side of the hall. Seeing that Su Ji and Fairy Xingyue had lured the 3 flying kite immortal beasts away, Xiao Hua did not dare to be negligent. With a sweep of his mind, he put his celestial artifact into the space, and then used his soul cultivation flying technique to fly in another direction. As Xiao Hua flew, he muttered in his heart, "Seniors, don't blame me for hiding it. This is a matter of life and death. If I reveal a bit of my divine ability in front of you, I will be hunted down even if I ascend to the immortal world in the future." Just as Xiao Hua approached a huge pillar, his body fell rapidly and landed on the ground. Then, he activated his soul power, and his entire body slowly straightened and changed into a square shape. This was the transformation technique that Xiao Hua had comprehended from Qingqiu Mountain in the star-picking deck. Although this soul power was not as useful as Dao Sec-dermic powers, Xiao Hua's human appearance still changed a little. Xiao Hua had just landed when the flying kite immortal beast's cries rang out behind the stone pillar. The last 2 flying kite immortal beasts also rushed into the main hall. One of them chased after Fairy Xingyue, while the other pounced on Xiao Hua. However, after the flying kite immortal beast landed, Xiao Hua's shadow was nowhere to be seen. The flying kite immortal beast's 3 legs moved step by step beside the huge pillar, and a powerful responding force swept across the ground inch by inch. The loud footsteps caused the entire hall to shake. Damn it! Xiaohua retracted his aura, leaving only a wisp of his consciousness outside. However, this wisp of consciousness swayed like withered grass in front of the valiant Ing Nian. Xiaohua could not help but curse angrily again. This young master has always been extremely lucky. Why is it that after arriving at the Star Moon Palace, my luck has become a complete mess? As if it had discovered something, the flying crane immortal beast approached the huge pillar with large strides. Its beak that was as hard as a crane's beak also slowly approached Xiaohua. An extremely fishy smell that carried an indescribable heat pressed towards Xiaohua. Admittedly, Xiaohua had already transformed and sealed off his 5 senses. However, the aura that was mixed with the echoing will still forced its way into Xiaohua's mind, mouth, and nose in waves. A feeling of being targeted involuntarily arose from the bottom of Xiaohua's heart. In an instant, Xiaohua felt a sense of regret. He had been too smart for his own good. If he had escaped earlier, the flying kite immortal beast would only have chased after him. At this moment, he was completely exposed to the flying kite immortal beast's attack range. If the flying kite immortal beast sensed that something was wrong and immediately attacked, it would be too late even if he summoned Taoist Witch, Celestial Being, and the others from the space. PFFF. At this moment, the flying kite immortal beast's sharp beak landed on Xiaohua's back. The heat almost melted Xiaohua's body. Xiaohua clenched his teeth and tried his best to endure the unspeakable pain. Fortunately, the flying kite immortal beast was only suspicious. After probing for a moment, its sharp beak left again. Boom! It landed on the corpse of an immortal general not far away and shattered the armor. The immortal general's corpse also turned into nothingness in a ball of crimson fire. Ow wow! The flying kite immortal beast took a few steps forward. As if it was angry, it roared at the sky and swept its tail horizontally. Boom! It hit the huge pillar. The pillar shook a few times, but it didn't fall. Boom boom boom. The flying kite immortal beast seemed to be venting its anger. It slammed into the pillar several times. Boom! The entire pillar finally collapsed. The roof of the palace that was already tilted fell again. Crash! The huge rocks engraved with runes had lost their restrictive power. They fell one after another like rain. They hit Xiaohua and the flying kite immortal beast. Immediately after, the flying kite immortal beast let out a few hurried cries as if it was very happy. It spread its wings and flew in another direction. In just a short moment, the entire hall returned to a state of tranquility that had lasted for countless years. However, Xiaohua didn't move. He also didn't release his soul remembrance or consciousness. He was waiting for the flying kite immortal beast to return. After half a cup of tea's time, the entire palace didn't have any abnormalities. Xiaohua released his soul remembrance and looked for a moment. Then, he raised his hand and pushed away the rocks that fell on him. Then, he didn't even look and flew into the distance. After flying past a few palaces, there were no more sounds. Xiaohua stopped again. He looked around and found a platform to sit down. He thought to himself, damn it, it's too dangerous. The immortal realm is indeed not a place for people to stay. Right now, not to mention sneaking into the immortal realm through the passage of the Star Moon Palace, even if the immortal realm's heavenly venerables invited me with 8 palanquins, I wouldn't go. I must cultivate my strength. Through ascension, I must temper my body in the spirit cleansing pool before going. Without the immortal spirit body and immortal spirit chi, I can't even defeat an immortal beast. What's the point of going to the immortal realm? Chapter 45-21. After resting for a while, Xiaohua looked at the mess in the hall and smiled again. Hee, I didn't dare to plunder at will outside Heaven's mansion for fear that Fairy Xingyi would see through it. Now that the flying jade immortal beast has entered Heaven's mansion, I'm afraid that the entire Heaven's mansion will be ruined by these beasts. Instead of that, it's better to let me take advantage of it. Thinking of this, Xiaohua released his mind. Whether it was the corpses, armor, immortal tools, storage bags, or the things in Heaven's mansion, they were all collected into the space like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. In just a moment, the entire hall was clean as if a dog had licked it. When the hall was clean, Xiaohua took out the wishful staff, looked around, and hit a giant pillar. Boom! The shaky roof of the hall fell, raising a burst of dust. Then, Xiaohua moved again, walking toward the depths of Heaven's mansion. Wherever he went, he swept away everything, and the halls collapsed one by one. As for Xiaohua's mind, he entered the space. When the figure of Jade Archive Xiaohua appeared, the figures of Taoist Witch, Celestial Being, Demon Venerable Shi and others also appeared. Fellow Taoists. Jade Archive Xiaohua did not delay, and told the story of the matter to his avatars. He asked straightforwardly, "The situation is so urgent, do you have any good ideas?" "Big brother." Demon Venerable Shi shouted, "I have no problem. This immortal chi conflicts with my devil chi, but I can use my means here." "Forget it." Jade Archive Xiaohua's face was black. "Once the devil blade appears, there is no need to wait for me to fly to the immortal world. Su Ji's immortal thunder will kill me. He is the punishment envoy of the punishment palace. How can he allow a cultivator with devil chi to fly to the immortal world? In that case, I can only act secretly." Taoist Witch asked faintly. "Of course." Jade Archive Xiaohua replied without hesitation. "Fellow Taoist is now a taboo in the immortal world. Although I don't know the reason, we'd better not touch it." "I have no problem." Celestial Being said arrogantly, "The immortal chi in this space fragment has no effect on me." "Fellow Taoist, there's no problem." However, Jade Archive Xiaohua still shook his head and said, "However, without that white bone, fellow Taoist wouldn't be a match for this bullshit immortal beast. However, if we take out white bone, Fairy Xingyue is a law envoy. She has great insight and might see through our methods. And TSK, I don't need to say more. The most precious thing in this space fragment has been taken by us. When she finds out that something is wrong, she will definitely look for me." Taoist Min smiled and said, "Since you can't do anything, my fellow Taoist, just keep hiding your true strength. Anyway, this heaven's abode seems to be of great importance. Su Ji and Fairy Xingyue don't want you to know the details. You might as well pretend to be ignorant until the end. Playing dumb is a must." Jade Archive Xiaohua nodded. "The problem now is how to escape. It's not a big problem if it's just the 5 of them." Taoist Min replied, "In this space fragment of the immortal realm, it seems that the power of law of the 3 continents has lost its effectiveness. Fellow Taoist, I in heavenly Tao can resist the immortal beasts. If you use your divine ability, of course, you can resist them too. However, it's best to avoid Su Ji and Fairy Xingyue. However, if it's as you're worried, and there are more than 5 immortal beasts in this space fragment, then it'll be troublesome. We can only rely on the 2 immortals to find the place to escape from this space fragment first. Sigh, these 2 immortals are a little too arrogant." Taoist Wu sighed and said, "Or they have some scruples. Before entering the Star Moon Palace, they should have discussed it with you more." "That's normal." Taoist Min smiled and said, "Didn't we come to the Star Moon Palace with Xiong Yi, Yuanya, and the others? Should we have discussed it with them?" "That's true." Demon Venerable Shi nodded. "I'm just afraid that Fairy Xingyue is hiding something that will be disadvantageous to you. Fairy Xingyue may have selfish motives, but Su Ji won't." Jade Archive Xiaohua shook his head. "As long as I'm with Su Ji, I don't have to worry about anything. The problem is that we're separated now. You have to be careful, big brother. Demon Venerable Shi seemed to have a natural resistance to immortals and reminded him. I know. Jade Archive Xiaohua nodded. You wait for a while to discuss. I'll go out first. After saying that, Xiaohua's mind left the space. However, after a moment, Xiaohua's mind fell on the continent where the immortal artifacts were. Then, he raised his hand and a flying fork that was nearly 100 feet long landed in his hand. This flying fork was blue in color. When it landed in Jade Archive Xiaohua's hand, it still gave off a chill. Looking at the sharp tip of the flying fork, where pieces of ice appeared out of thin air, Jade Archive Xiaohua smiled and said, "This immortal artifact is of the ice attribute, which is the nemesis of the immortal beasts. We'll rely on this to kill the immortal beasts. Unfortunately, even if I use all my magic power, I'm afraid I won't be able to pierce through the scales of the immortal beasts. I can only rely on Su Ji for this." However, Su Ji's divine ability hasn't recovered yet, so he probably won't be able to fully activate this immortal artifact. I still have to add some materials. After thinking for a while, Jade Archive Xiaohua raised his hand and several drops of Xiantian true water floated into the air. As Jade Archive Xiaohua raised his hand and grabbed, the Xiantian true water fell into the spikes of the flying fork. After finishing his preparations, Jade Archive Xiaohua left the space again. However, he didn't bring the flying fork out of the space. He casually knocked over another stone pillar and the entire palace collapsed. Xiaohua stepped into a collapsed palace. The roof of this palace was long gone. The broken pillars, some huge rocks, and the jade table all fell into the dust. Xiaohua looked around. His mind was like quicksilver as he put the jade table, pearls, and other things into the space. Then, he turned around and looked outside the palace. Outside the palace was an even more spacious courtyard. There were many immortal herbs and immortal trees that Xiaohua didn't recognize. Moreover, because the restrictions of the heavenly abode were damaged during the battle, these immortal trees and immortal herbs weren't protected by any restrictions at all. They looked as if they could be picked by anyone. Seeing this, Xiaohua's eyes lit up. He flew in front of a stalk of immortal grass. Just as he was about to reach out and grab it, he thought for a moment and stopped. After thinking for a bit, his mind entered the space again. When he came out, Xiaoguo also came out. Xiaoguo's body in the immortal spiritual energy was as he expected. Her spirit body wasn't affected by the immortal spiritual energy and didn't have any special discomfort. Xiaohua was overjoyed and said in a low voice, "Xiaoguo, I'll leave this place too." Xiaoguo, what's wrong? Could it be that you can't stay in this space for a long time? No. Xiaoguo's small body trembled like a sieve. His red face was now as white as snow. His eyes flickered with extreme fear as he looked at the top of Xiaohua's head behind his back, stuttering as he spoke. Seeing this, Xiaohua's heart tightened even though he didn't have any warning signs in his heart. His mind wrapped around Xiaoguo and he desperately urged his soul power. His body didn't move at all as he flew into the distance. Woo! Xiaohua's body had just moved when a gust of wind appeared behind Xiaohua. 3 scarlet-red claws of the flying crane immortal beast stretched out from the void and directly fell on Xiaohua's back. Slash! Boom! Xiaohua was indeed quick to react and left a string of afterimages in the air. However, one of the kite immortal beast's sharp claws still landed on his back. Amidst the sound, Xiaohua's back was torn apart and his muscles were torn apart. The other 2 claws even scratched the ground and created a crack that was several meters long. At this moment, the kite immortal beast that was hidden in the void finally revealed itself and landed heavily on the ground. Damn it! Xiaohua narrowly escaped a calamity. The sharp pain in his back pierced his heart. He angrily cursed. He knew in his heart that it was definitely him who pushed down the palace and attracted the flying crane immortal beast's attention. The flying crane immortal beast was lying in ambush in the void in advance, waiting for him to fall into its trap. If he didn't see the courtyard filled with immortal herbs and had the sudden idea to come out from the collapsed palace, he would have already been killed by the flying crane immortal beast. Looking at the flying crane immortal beast again, after its attack missed, it swept its huge tail again. At the same time, several immortal trees were broken and the space was torn apart. Xiaohua didn't have time to put Xiaoguo into the space. He casually threw her to the ground and clenched his fists. Woo! He faced the flying crane immortal beast head-on. Pu-pu. First, there were two muffled sounds. Xiaohua's fists had hit the flying crane immortal beast's tail. At the same time, boom boom boom. A series of explosions sounded. Xiaohua's body was hit by the flying crane immortal beast's tail and flew horizontally like a meteor. In an instant, he pierced through more than 10 stone walls and disappeared after raising a cloud of dust. Ayo! The flying crane immortal beast roared loudly. It seemed to be excited. It flapped its wings and its huge body also moved. It followed Xiaohua's direction and pounced. Everywhere the flying crane immortal beast passed, more than 10 stone walls were completely destroyed by the flying crane immortal beast. That continuous palace once again collapsed with a loud bang. Whoosh! Not only that, the flying crane immortal beast rushed out 100 feet and opened its mouth again. A crimson pillar of fire shot out from the cave that Xiaohua had pierced through. The stone walls and pillars all melted and disappeared in this pillar of fire. Roar! While the flying crane immortal beast was frantically attacking, it heard Xiaohua's roar. Suddenly, he rushed out from behind a stone pillar and waved the wishful steel staff in his hand. Boom! It smashed into the flying crane immortal beast's claws. In the huge roar, the flying crane immortal beast's claws trembled slightly. A layer of marks on it suddenly flashed with red light. A great impact force was generated. Not only did it block Xiaohua's wishful steel staff, but the remaining force was not exhausted. Xiaohua's figure was sent flying upside down in midair. Shua! The flying crane immortal beast waved its claws very fiercely. Without waiting for Xiaohua to fly more than 10 feet, it hit Xiaohua's chest again. Xiaohua's body collapsed and his whole figure was once again sent flying like gravel. Chapter 45-22. Roar! The flying crane immortal beast's figure flashed, leaving behind a string of afterimages as it chased after Xiaohua. This time, its tail pierced towards Xiaohua's chest from the bottom. At the tip of the tail, a sharp cone-like protrusion flashed with red light. Even the space was about to be burned into fragments by the red light. Although Xiaohua's figure was unbalanced in the air, his expression changed greatly when he saw the flying crane immortal beast's tail piercing towards him. His entire body curled up in the air, and a vortex of afterimages bloomed in the air. The flying crane immortal beast's tail pierced into one of the vortexes. Whoosh! At the same time, Xiaohua's figure appeared in another place. He did not stop at all, and like flowing water, he rushed into the flying crane immortal beast's body. Without waiting for the flying crane immortal beast's sharp claws to attack, Xiaohua had already landed on the flying crane immortal beast's body. With a shake of his hand, the immortal tool that condensed the innate primordial water was already in his hand. He raised his arm and was about to stab it into the flying crane immortal beast's back. At this moment, the markings on the flying crane immortal beast's scales lit up, and the fur or feathers between the scales began to move. This movement was very strange, it was like the beating of a drum, and the space around Xiaohua was trembling. Not good. Seeing the powerful fluctuations in the space, how could Xiaohua care about killing the flying crane immortal beast? He growled and hurriedly urged his soul power to escape from the flying crane immortal beast's body. Boom! Just as Xiaohua left, tens of thousands of flames flew out from the void and connected with the red light on the flying crane immortal beast's scales. A sea of fire enveloped the surrounding space of a few hundred feet. Damn it! Xiaohua had already used the fire origin to temper his body, but when he touched the fire of the immortal realm, his body showed signs of melting. It seemed like he did not dare to take the risk. Xiaohua cursed and crashed into the damaged palace. How could the flying crane immortal beast let Xiaohua go? It roared and also crashed into the palace. The palaces of the heavenly abode collapsed one after another, like an earth dragon rolling under the ground. Translator, Atlas Studios editor, Atlas Studios Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu were also chased to the left by the Gallium immortal beast. Hearing the collapsing stone walls, Su Ji's expression changed and he transmitted his voice, Xingyue, quick, Xiaohua is being chased by the Gallium immortal beast. Alright. Fairy Xingyu scanned the area with her mind and saw that there were two celestial phalanx beasts behind Su Ji. She knew that Xiaohua was also targeted by the celestial phalanx beasts. She did not dare to be careless. With a flash, she crossed the courtyard outside the hall and was about to rush over. However, just as she passed by, she suddenly frowned and her gaze fell on the ground. However, she only glanced at it for a moment before the fire pillar behind her attacked her. Fairy Xingyue had no choice but to dodge it. On the other side of the hall, Su Ji's body was also flickering with silver light and lightning as he quickly rushed over. However, when Su Ji and Fairy Xingyue rushed into the main hall and saw the situation inside, they couldn't help but gasp. Their hearts were completely cold. At this time, Xiaohua had been smashed into the stone wall by the flying crane immortal beast with its tail. Half of his body was embedded in the wall. Except for the huge flying fork in his left arm, which could still move, the rest of his body was riddled with injuries. Damn it! Su Ji was shocked and did not hesitate to activate his immortal qi. However, even if an immortal had arrived, it was already too late. The flying crane immortal beast turned its head slightly and glanced at Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu. Roar! It opened its mouth and tried to devour Xiaohua. However, the entire space in front of Xiaohua was distorted. The stone wall where Xiaohua was located shook violently. Everything was covered by the devouring power of the flying crane immortal beast. Xiaohua's hands and feet were also swaying in the wind like withered branches. At this moment, Xiaohua suddenly moved. He waved the flying fork in his left hand, and the huge flying fork flew into the flying crane immortal beast's mouth faster than a meteor. Unsurprisingly, the flying fork fell into the flying crane immortal beast's mouth along with some gravel. As soon as the flying fork fell in, the flying crane immortal beast was shocked, as if it had sensed something. Without any hesitation, the phalanx immortal beast let out a deep roar as a crimson flame burst out of its mouth. It would have been fine if the flame had not been born. As soon as it was born, a huge explosion came from the flying crane immortal beast's body. Moreover, this explosion sounded like firecrackers, from its slender neck to its tail. Following this explosion, the flying crane immortal beast's neck exploded, and its body exploded. Even its tail exploded. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere. The flying crane immortal beast, which even an immortal could not kill, turned into blood clots just like that. How is this possible? Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu were not the only ones who were stunned on the spot. They looked at Xiaohua, who seemed to be on the verge of death, in disbelief. Even the four flying crane immortal beasts stopped in mid-air, not knowing what to do. However, in just a moment, the blood qi on the flying crane immortal beast's corpse aroused the bestial nature of the four flying crane immortal beasts. The flying crane immortal beasts roared and pounced on Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu again. Rumble! Su Ji urged the lightning to fight with the flying crane immortal beast. Fairy Xingyu also waved the star saber and the moon saber to resist. For a moment, there was chaos, and no one paid attention to Xiaohua. Damn it, I finally found the flying crane immortal beast's weakness. Xiaohua could have escaped, but at this time, he was indeed a little weak and numb, so he simply hid on the stone wall and pretended to be dead. His mind had already entered the space. On one hand, he was looking for an ice-type immortal weapon, and on the other, he was refining the innate primordial water to the sharp points of the immortal weapons. After refining the 4 immortal weapons, Xiaohua naturally couldn't give them to Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu in front of them. He just threw the 4 immortal weapons far away, waiting for an opportunity to remind them. Just as Xiaohua was thinking about how to open his mouth, the 4 flying jade immortal beasts suddenly stopped. Then, they raised their heads and looked towards a certain direction at the same time. Finally, they let out a few cries in unison and spread their wings. They actually abandoned Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu and broke through the roof of the heavenly abode. They flew into the sky and disappeared in a moment. Phew! Xiaohua let out a long breath, feeling as if he had just survived a disaster. As Su Ji rushed into the sky, he released his spiritual sense to investigate and ordered Fairy Xingyu to rescue Xiaohua. Fairy Xingyu pulled Xiaohua out of the stone wall. Xiaohua took the opportunity to fall to the ground like a pile of mud. He looked at Fairy Xingyu and said, "Elder sister. You'd better not save me. Let me die. This space fragment is already so dangerous. Even the immortal beasts in your immortal realm are so powerful. How can we go to the other space fragments?" Fairy Xingyu also put away her previous smile and nodded. "You're right. This space fragment is really too strange. This Star Moon Palace is also different from what we thought before. Then we should retreat first and go to the other space fragments. Can't we?" Xiaohua suggested. "Instead of retreating, it's better to go forward." Fairy Xingyu answered without hesitation. At this time, Su Ji landed and said in disbelief, "These flying crane immortal beasts really left. It's really strange." "There's nothing strange about it." Fairy Xingyu replied, "There are only 2 possibilities. First, there are not only 5 flying crane immortal beasts in this space fragment, but also other flying crane immortal beasts in groups. And this possibility is very high. I remember that flying crane immortal beasts always appear in groups. Second, the 4 great families and the great demons of the demon clan have also stepped into this space fragment. They have many people and are weak. Naturally, they will be easily discovered by the flying crane immortal beasts. No matter what the possibility is, now that the flying crane immortal beasts have indeed left, we should quickly find the location of this space fragment," Xiaohua urged. Hearing this, Su Ji looked at Fairy Xingyu. Fairy Xingyu smiled bitterly and said, "The space fragment and the meteor belt seem to be opposite from each other from the outside. However, inside the space fragment, these 2 positions don't necessarily have to be opposite. And no one knows where this position is. Sometimes it's at the top of a mountain, sometimes it's at the seaside, and sometimes it's in a cave. However, this place usually has the power of the stars and moon seeping out. I can use the star shuttle to find the approximate location. Big sister, hurry up and activate it." Thinking of how Fairy Xingyu did not say anything after entering the space fragment, and how she was not in a hurry, Xiaohua could not help but feel a little anxious and urged her. "When I entered the space fragment, I already activated the star shuttle." Fairy Xingyu smiled bitterly and said, "But at that time, I didn't find the location of the exit." "Ah. You activated the star shuttle at that time to find the exit?" Xiaohua was dumbfounded. Although he was confused by Fairy Xingyu's smile at that time, he still had some impression of it. He thought that Fairy Xingyu was just testing the immortal qi in the space fragment. He did not expect that she was looking for the exit. Fairy Xingyu glared at Xiaohua and said, "Then what did you think I was doing? The immortal qi in Su Ji's and my body is very precious. How could I use it casually?" "Big sister, what about now?" Xiaohua asked again, "The situation is urgent now. No matter how precious the immortal qi is, you have to activate it." Do you think I don't want to activate the star shuttle? I want to activate it too. Fairy Xingyu said helplessly, but the immortal chi used to activate the star shuttle to find the exit is far from what is used to attack. I can't activate a large amount of immortal chi at this time, or my body will collapse. Alas, okay. Xiao Hua had already seen some blood flowing under Su Ji's armor. He knew that what Fairy Xingyu said was true. He sighed and said, "Senior, quickly take some pills to heal your injuries." Okay. Fairy Xingyu nodded and took another pill. After she sat down, Su Ji looked at the ruins around him and said, "You two rest here. Be careful and hide yourselves. I'll go outside to explore and see what's going on with the Gallium immortal beasts. If it's a group of Gallium immortal beasts, we have to plan early."